Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. I hope the audio is coming fine. Yes, it seems to. So I'll have my phone here because again, my StreamYard subscription is over and I'm using OBS to do my live stream. So my computer graphics card, whatever I have, they can't handle the fact that I'm going to open a Google Chrome, OBS, the Google Chrome here for Google Meet and do a live stream. So my video is going to lag, but it's going to be in a better video and audio quality than StreamYard at least. So I'll check out the comments here. So firstly, I can see Rishi has made 2 comments. So Rishi, did you write some more points as well? Because I can only see your point number 4 and 6. I don't know where the rest of them disappeared, okay? So it would be best if you comment all of them once again, okay? And before that, I'll just take a bit of your time in the very beginning to talk about a crowdfunding thing going on in my life for those of you all who are unaware. I'm doing something called a Kal Bhairav Ashtakam Vigilance music video project, okay? I'm a music producer by profession and this is my most ambitious project so far. We are seeking to raise 3.5 lakh rupees. So far we have raised 21,462 rupees here on keto.org and many people have sent individual anonymous and as well as non-anonymous donations to my GPay as well. The links are given in the description box and will be later given in the pinned comment as well. Let me just tell you what it's about so that you can understand whether you feel like contributing and donating to this project or not. So I'm making Kal Bhairav Ashtakam music video. The goal is to make it look like, I hope the audio is coming fine, right? Yeah. The goal is to make it look like something like Kantara, Hanuman Kinds, Run It Up, those levels, okay, which are internationally recognized, so definitely, at least are nationally recognized, nationally accepted, nationally celebrated projects, Kantara, Hanuman Kind. Now, nothing from Bengal of that sort has come in recent times, right? Probably ever since Satyajit Ray and Ritik Ghatak to a large extent. I want to change that and address some narrative issues. I think win some narrative battles through this song, which you will probably get the vibe of what I'm talking about if you listen to my description, what I'm about to tell you about the song close enough. And for significant donors, backers, patrons, I am personally going to, as I have already done, I've spoken to many people and told them the entire story, screenplay, entire concept that I have written myself to go with the video. So it's basically about a bunch of Kal Bhairav sadhakas, upasakas who practice a Bengali martial art, a Bengal-based folk culture-based martial art. The music also has influences of Bengali folk, obviously. And it has rap, it has Hindustani classical guitar solos, it has 4 people singing in 8 to 12 layers. So far I have sung 12 layers. My friend has sung 8 layers and he will sing 8 more layers of harmonies. And 2 other singers will get involved. And it will address those martial artists of Bengal who are Bhairava sadhakas and upasakas as well, will seek to solve one specific societal injustice and crime that goes on, okay? I'm not revealing that right now on the video, on a live stream, but if anyone's a significant donor, they will get to know the story beforehand, as well get executive producer credits, and anyone who donates gets producer credits as well in the video, at the end of the video. So let me see some comments. Okay, now let me tell you what the project is about. This is a small write-up that kind of gives you a vibe of it all. From Vanga for Bharat. Namaste, I'm Nirajan Shah, music producer and the sole creator behind the YouTube channel College Street, Kolkata. This campaign is an invitation to support my most ambitious project yet, Kal Bhairav Ashtakam Vigilance, a groundbreaking genre-defying music video that reimagines the 8th century Sanskrit stotram by Jagadguru Adi Shankaracharya. Rooted deeply in Vanga's cultural ethos, the composition fuses Bengal's folk traditions, Bangla rap, Hindustani classical guitar, Western orchestral arrangements, and epic choral segments, resulting in a powerful, groovy, and cinematic musical experience. Why this project matters. Mainstream Indian pop culture has long sidelined voices that are rooted in Bharatiya traditions. Far too often, culturally grounded characters, especially Sanskrit-speaking ones, are caricatured as foolish, villainous, or irrelevant. This portrayal has unfortunately shaped perceptions for generations, leading many to believe that being deeply connected to one's roots is incompatible with being a good human or an intelligent human or even being artistically relevant. While recent outliers like Kantara, Bahubali, and Hanuman Kinds Run It Up have challenged this narrative, they remain exceptions in a landscape dominated by a cultural disconnect. Bengal, once a fountainhead of refined cinema and music, has in recent decades fallen behind both in terms of representation and quality. Conversely, pro-Bharatiya content, despite its good intentions, more often than not, suffers from underwhelming production values and limited, very, very limited, laughable cultural impact. With Kalbhairavashtakam Vigilance, I aim to change that by telling an original story rooted in Vanga's spirit, with high production value, musical sophistication, and a message that resonates with every generation, including leftists probably. The vision. The music video will feature a high-octane narrative. Choop, choop. The song has to appeal to other people as well, right? So it does, I think, it can achieve that. It has elements of that so that it will be relevant to everyone. The music video will feature a high-octane narrative centered around Bengal's martial and spiritual heritage. While the storyline remains under wraps to avoid spoilers, I can share this. It explores the theme of a particular social injustice and the rise of Bhairava sadhakas and sadhikas in response, who take matters into their own hands. The aesthetics will evoke the energy and visual depth of Kantara, with vigilante characters inspired by Bharatiya martial arts, and the sang's efforts in promoting physical discipline and self-defense. The soundscape draws from Bengal's folk traditions while pushing boundaries with rap, classical, and epic orchestration. The collaborators. The project features an impressive lineup of Eastern India's emerging musical talent. Spill Freak or Showmayan Sarkar, one of Bengal's most powerful voices in Bangla rap, infamous for fearlessly addressing the plight of Bangladeshi Hindus through his music and social media posts. Sharna Bhagupto, a gifted guitarist who blends Hindustani classical with rock and is a committed Shakta in personal life. Someday, right before the release or after the release, I'll tell you the full story, and we will have him on for a podcast as well. Who are the vocalists? Myself, Shorab Dash, and the Kormokar brothers, Moinak Kormokar and Mallar Kormokar, who make up the popular composer-vocalist duo called Mac Mallar. Moinak's nickname for the industry is Mac because apparently no one in Mumbai could pronounce his name, Moinak. The creative minds behind blockbuster Durga Puja hits like Ailo Ma Barite featuring Antara Nondi and Uma Ashe Notun Saje featuring Ankita Bhattacharya. I've also had the pleasure of programming and arranging music for both songs. Execution and team. I'm overseeing the story, screenplay, concept, and full music production. The project is being executed in collaboration with a talented group of martial artists, performers, and film professionals, including a director, line producer, and cinematographer, all chosen for their commitment, creativity, and fresh perspectives rather than celebrity status. Their names will be revealed closer to the video release to avoid professional backlash. But rest assured, they are highly devoted to the vision. A fun anecdote that reflects the spirit of this project, okay? During our first budget meeting, our line producer's phone rang, and to my surprise, his ringtone was the Kalbhairavashtakam by Agam Agarwal. I assumed he liked the musicality of the stotram from listening to our draft version and therefore put up a more famous version of it as his ringtone. But I was wrong. It had been his ringtone for over 4 years. He even raised concerns about how the stotram unfolds as the background of some specific story beats that he felt are disrespectful on hearing it for the first time. And only after a deep discussion with me and finding out the full context of the story did he come on board, which is a testament to the sincerity and integrity driving this endeavor. So, join the movement. This is more than a music video. It's a cultural statement from Vanga for Bharat. Your support will bring to life a bold artistic vision that seeks to reclaim and reimagine what it means to be rooted in Bharatiya culture in the modern world with excellence, depth, and resonance. Let's make history together. Support Kalbhairavashtakam Vigilance. And those who are interested to actually donate, they can check out the complete budget breakdown of why we are seeking this particular amount, okay? Next, let's go to today's topic. We are today going to check out infamous hated libertarian Dave Smith and his debate with Alex Nowrasteh on immigration, whether immigration should be free for all or not. Dave Smith is hated by libertarians because of his stances against complete immigration, complete free election for anyone and everyone, anarcho-capitalism style libertarianism. And he's hated by a lot of non-libertarians as well in many countries. because of his support for Palestine. He considers Israel to be the culprit here. He's a Jew himself, so those arguments are going to be fun. So let's go to that now, and I'll check some comments before starting the debate. Let me see what's going on. I know nothing about music, but I was watching you from more than 1 year, and I was eagerly waiting to listen your music. Thank you. Alapon Podia is asking how much money is raised up until now. 46,000, a little more than 46,000. About 21,000 something that you saw on keto.org, and some about 25,000 from my GPay donations. Srijan is asking, does the internet even know Bengal had a history of martial arts? Yeah, they don't, which is why this video will be important. I see majority musicians who want to do pro-Hindu music, they always just copy old mantras and make them sound. Are you doing something new or the same? I am using the Kalbhairav Ashtakam old mantra. The arrangement, music production will be completely new and in a different way, including genre influences from hip-hop, Bengali folk, Western classical, epic orchestration, and there will be rap as well, guitar solos. So if unless we copy mantras, there aren't going to be any Indic Hindu music really. Hindu devotional songs need to stay alive with evolving genres, right? Rishi's comments, only 2 were received. Okay, let's start now.
Hey, what's up, guys? How's everybody doing? Thank you guys very much for coming out. Thank you, Gene, and thank you, Alex, for being here. I used to be at like every Soho Forum debate back in a time when I had less commitments and babies. And so this is very nice to be back, and it's
Read comments from start. Yeah, only 2 comments of yours actually are showing here. Okay, Rishi. You wrote point 4 and point 6. We have enough unskilled labor in India. There is actually shortage of skilled labor, skilled workers. Skilled workers. Where did it go? Yeah, skilled workers certainly can't be Paki or Bangladeshi. Urban areas should be combed regularly to search for immigrants. Our border situation is unparalleled or even worse than Israel, and that's me saying that it's the opinion of a Lieutenant General of Indian Army. Yeah, fair enough. I do know these points. Let's see if we find out some even better points from anarcho capitalists here.
And it's great to see a lot of familiar faces. Me and look, I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with me, but it's nice to do one debate where I'm not going to piss off the Jews. You know what I mean? Like, that's pretty huge for me these days. Okay, sorry. But you guys got it. There's the whole thing about the Jews. Anyway, okay. So this is, me and Alex have, over the years, we have traded some not so friendly tweets back and forth, but I do want to start by saying that I really am grateful to Alex for coming here today. Even when we were not getting along on Twitter, I've always genuinely respected Alex's intelligence, and I think he is somebody who really has a mastery of the data on this issue, unlike many others. And I think this is an issue that maybe the one thing me and Alex would agree on is that it's an issue that's really important that libertarians get right, especially today, because this is the issue that's gotten the sitting president of the United States of America elected twice. It was the central issues of his campaign. According to almost all of the opinion polls through the 2024 presidential election, immigration was either number 1 or number 2. And so the question before us tonight is whether libertarians ought to support restrictions on immigration, or at least in some categories. So I would start with this. It's something that kind of everybody in the room knows already, but really the foundational principle of libertarianism is all orbits around voluntarism, voluntary exchanges. Now, people will start at different starting points, but basically that's what it is to be a libertarian, is to believe in even things like property rights, the non-aggression principle. All of them are essentially built around the idea that we prefer voluntary exchange and we reject coercion or aggression. And there are different types of libertarians who are libertarians for different reasons, some more radical than others, but that kind of is the centerpiece of what you're arguing for. If you're arguing for a libertarian society, you're arguing for more voluntary exchanges and less coercion. And if that's your starting point, and then your end point is supporting a policy that you would have to support in order to reject this resolution, that would essentially be saying you are going to drastically change almost every aspect of our society against the will of almost all of the people who live here. I would humbly suggest you've messed up somewhere along the line. Like if your kid brought you their homework and their starting point was everything should be voluntarily, every exchange should be voluntary, and their end point was I am going to force on hundreds of millions of people their nation to be changed radically in almost every area you could imagine, culturally, politically, religiously, all types of different areas. If that is your endpoint, I think it's worth re-examining how you got there. And I'm saying here that, again, if you look at where the American people are, there are kind of, it's hard to get a gauge exactly. Like almost no pollster will ever ask, do you support open borders? Or close to something where there's no restrictions except for violent or ill people, two fairly arbitrary limitations. Almost no one will ask that question, but if you look at where the American people are on immigration, it's nowhere near there. And it's about as much of a consensus on any issue as you could find in America that people reject Alex's position on this. Now, by the way, that is not, that does not mean Alex is wrong. I certainly hold lots of positions that the overwhelming majority of people would reject. I'm not making an appeal to democracy or an appeal to popularity. I'm making an appeal to voluntarism. My argument is that if the people of a country do not wish to have a large number of immigrants coming in, then it is not a voluntary transaction to force that on them. And I think one of the things that libertarians, have a little bit of an issue with on this is that it certainly does seem as a reasonable starting point, and this is why I used to favor more of an open borders view, it seems as a reasonable starting point that we don't want the government doing anything to anyone. We don't want the government stopping somebody who's not aggressing or committing some type of...
Rishi is saying some libertarians often don't take the geography of the country into the picture and who the neighbors are. Yes, they are called anarcho-capitalists, anarcho-libertarians, etc. Now, Libertarian Party of India's official policy was that we have crazy neighbors, we can't go that route. So, let's see where they end up later on. But yes, not all libertarians, don't blame all libertarians for being that crazy. लिबर्टेरियनिज्म हमारे लिए है, हमारे देश के लिए है, देश के अंदर के लिए, पूरे दुनिया को लिबर्टेरियन बनाने का चक्कर हमारा नहीं है. Which is why national libertarianism, which is one of the phrases in the title of this live stream, and as well as remember that NatCon discussion, that summit sort of thing where Shobhan Dasgupta went, and who's that RSS head, he went, and Vivek Ramaswamy also went there. So there Vivek was talking about national libertarianism. He was saying that right now the debate is all the kinds of arguments that we see, they can broadly be categorized into three categories. Conservatism, progressivism, and national libertarianism. So I am on the national libertarian side. I do believe there is a nation. I believe libertarianism inside the nation. So the national part is there in my personal mind. Now let's see another comment. Ash Ketchum is saying Dave Smith is a populist now. Pretty much, which is why he is very hated by most libertarians. But libertarians like his stance on Israel.
Violent crime. But the truth is that we find ourselves in an awkward position when it comes to immigration. Because immigration is a government policy. Whether you have open borders or closed borders or anything in between, as long as the government is controlling those borders and the government is dictating immigration policy, what you have is a government program. And if you have a scenario where, let's say, 95% of the American people oppose an immigration system that would say anybody can come here as long as you're not sick, or as long as you're not violent, you can come here. The overwhelming, it might be substantially higher than 95%, to be honest. We could get into the poll.
I personally think Dave Smith has started off with a very subtle and good point, because it might come across as an appeal to mass views, etc., which is in the end what you will have to work with in a democracy. But at least if it was just that, it would not have been a fair thing to do in a debate, because here you are debating ideas for ideas' sake, not on the basis of how popular they are. But he is not actually doing that. He's talking about the libertarian idea of voluntarism, voluntary participation, your wishes being honored. So if you want to live your life the way you want to, and a libertarian state pretends to give you that, but also then lets people enter the country who will change your way of life completely, then how does your voluntarism even exist? Unless we will get through the debate, of course. The blind faith on state to manage whatever the amount of immigration, that's where I am in this argument. The protection of life, liberty, and property, which should be the only duties of the state, according to me, even that I don't think can be done with illegal immigration. Because let's say even if we have progressive liberal self-defense laws and stuff, so everyone is armed to the tits and they don't let any illegal immigrant harm them. To what extent? How many are going to have arms? How many are going to come across come off as the winner in that exchange, in that self-defense exchange? How many? But I am, of course, making a gigantic assumption here, a sweeping assumption here, that they might end up being criminals. Now, in our situation, that probably will be the case because of our neighbors. What if some of them aren't? There we have the question of what about our labor force, okay, which already exists in the country. There, Rishi has given some arguments, obviously. Now, there will be counter arguments to that idea as well from the guy who is debating Dave Smith here. So do wait with a calm mind for his arguments as well. He did give some interesting arguments on that front.
Later, but there's been a lot of efforts, I think at times from the Cato Institute, to kind of spin the polls and say, support for higher immigration has gone up. A Cato, piece would read 10 years ago. And it's like, yeah, it's gone up to 17%. 17% support more immigration. What percentage actually supports what this type of policy would lead toward? Very, very few. So you have the overwhelming majority of the American people who do not support this policy. And as Brian Kaplan, who I also consider to be one of the most brilliant minds that libertarians have, as he has admitted himself, I don't know if he would consider it an admission, but from 1965 to today, higher levels of immigration have always been unpopular. Single-digit support for most of the years, higher levels of immigration. The American people have consistently, since 1965, said, we do not want this immigration policy. We want less people coming into the country, not more. Now, I will point this out, before I get into a little bit more of this argument, I will point out that, and I don't think I'm making a pedantic point here, I think this is actually very crucial to the debate. It is impossible to oppose this resolution unless you support unrestricted open borders, period. Like zero restrictions. Because even if you're going to argue, as Alex has in the past, and many other of his Cato colleagues, for an Ellis Island style system, you're still supporting an enormous restriction on peaceful and healthy people. Because it's a prior restraint on their freedom of movement. So in other words, if the government were to say outside this venue, they were going to set up an Ellis Island style checkpoint. Okay, and you had to go through this checkpoint in order to continue traveling down the road. And this meant, let's make it real Ellis Island standards. You were going to get a health and psychological evaluation, including being forced to disrobe, having your eyelids checked. If you were older, you were going to be passed on for additional screening. You would be held for at least hours, in many cases days, in extreme cases months and even years, before you were granted the right to continue traveling. Me, Gene, Alex, and every single person in this room would consider this to be an egregious violation of our liberty. We would all say, you're Joseph Stalin if you support that policy. And yet Alex and many of his colleagues will support that policy when it comes to immigration. It's almost like they're kind of admitting immigration is different. It's a different situation. And once you support something like an Ellis Island style, system, it's the the old bit. where the man asks the woman, will you sleep with me for $10 million? And she says, okay. And he goes, will you sleep with me for $1? And she says, who do you think I am? And he says, we've already established who you are. Now we're just negotiating. Now, so often, many of the people who will argue for open borders or quasi-open borders will not bite the bullet and say there should be absolutely no restrictions, but they argue as if they do believe that. Now, the fundamental point that I think libertarians need to understand here about whether our position should be open or closed or anything in between is that this all comes down to the issue of government property. Governments are the ones who control the borders. Now, there are some areas of the US border that are privately owned. And by the way, the people who privately own that land have been demanding that the government serve its only legitimate function and protect private property and protect them from trespassers, for which the government has not been doing its only legitimate job. But the point is that many libertarians will act as if it's a given that there ought to be no restrictions on government property. But that simply isn't true. It's not deduced from libertarian principles, and none of us would apply that standard in life in general. You know, Alex shared recently, as this debate was coming up, he shared a meme, which I'm not holding him to the argument of the meme. I understand he can present his argument tonight. But I did think there was something interesting about this. He shared a meme, and it was like, on my side of the meme was like all the mental gymnastics you have to do to be a libertarian, to support closed borders, and it's like Manette taxpayers, or they're going to vote for Democrats, or a bunch of different steps. And on Alex's side, it was just one guy who said government property is illegitimate. And it's like, okay. Now, I understand that's not exactly your argument. My point is just that many of the people who argue for this lax immigration policy, they act as if that's the pure libertarian position. But ask yourself, is that really the pure libertarian position? Is it the case that if the government is currently in control of some property, that therefore there ought to be zero restrictions? If that were the case, then public schools could not tell a random 55-year-old drug addict that he can't enter the school and hang out in the girls' bathroom. Why? Would you restrict someone's freedom of movement? Would you say that all government property, you should be able to scream obscenities in a public library, that you should be able to lay down and camp out in the middle of a freeway? Is it wrong? Is the libertarian position that since a government has control of a highway, therefore they cannot institute a speed limit? That the speed limit ought to be whatever you can do? I don't think that actually follows. I think that if we recognize that taxation is theft, and we recognize that governments are built off aggression, they built and maintained public...
You know, although I have seen some reviews of this debate and comment sections, etc., where people have largely concluded, libertarians were mainly viewing this, of course. So, and they have concluded that Dave Smith got absolutely hammered, destroyed in the debate. So we have seen only 13 minutes of it, so we don't know as of now what happened in the rest of the debate. Neither do I really. I have seen only, first about 5-6 minutes of the guy he was debating. But the reason I'm bringing this up here is because I think Dave Smith is doing a great job, and especially he's being able to do this great job because he has been a libertarian all his life. So he kind of has that same advantage that I have while debating commies, that since I was one of them, so I know the question paper before coming to the exam room. Okay, that's what he's doing here. He knows what are the libertarian talking points. He knows what he will be hit with. So he is one step ahead and diving straight into those accusations that are going to come to him, which is why I think this is a very a beautiful debate, and only a libertarian, or at least a former libertarian, or a libertarian who is not crazy enough to believe in anarcho-capitalism, that kind of a libertarian is doing this debate. So this is a lot more fun than it would have been if a non-libertarian had been debating this guy Alex Nowrasteh.
Property with tax dollars that they took at the threat of violence.
Okay, by the way, let me just respond to some of the comments. Alapon was saying, do you have a monetary target for the project? Yeah, Alapon, 3.5 lakh rupees. Karthik is saying, director James Gunn, who underscored how Superman's immigrant identity is weaved into the film storyline. By the way, Karthik, I saw Chris Gore, another guy, DC something. He is one of the people who does those regular live streams with Nerdrotic, okay? So his review I saw, and there he mentioned that immigration thing has been just touched upon. It's just a mountain out of a molehill made by the media. The movie is not about that. He's not giving a pro-immigration message in the movie. It's not that political, okay? He was not. He didn't really say that. Therefore, the movie is absolutely awesome and go watch it. He had other problems with the movie, but that particular issue is wokeism is not an issue that this Superman movie has, okay? According to him. Another thing I wanted to respond to. Oh yeah, Retroive is saying Tomaldar গান শুনলাম ভিডিও দেখলাম YouTube is criminal. Retroive, did you listen to his older songs? I hope up until 2021, 2020, 2020, etc. If you listen to those songs, then you got the full blast of his awesomeness. I feel there is a. By the way, what's this Mukut thing besides the names of Srijan, Ashkecham here? Ashkecham is number 1. Srijan is number 2. What are those? Did you all donate any super chat or something here, or have you all been the highest amounts of super chat donors? What's going on? Why are there names or those symbols by the side of your name? Ash is saying, so this is an argument for methodological collectivism and normative individualism instead of possessive individualism. Yeah, like arguing for a country which is a collective entity of all citizens or taxpayers. Yeah. I first went to oldest and started. Yeah. What video concepts, right, Retroive? Most independent music video producers, composers who think of their own music video, who like to put out their video from their own channel, who are not really being handled by the recording label, etc. Even they often don't really think of any music video beyond that one girl in sari roaming about on the streets of Kolkata or in a forest or walking around trees, etc. Can you believe the hypocrisy of those people? They have all their lives, they have made fun of Bollywood for doing exactly that. Oh, running around trees. Now for views, they do those same kinds of videos. And or at best it will be one girl walking in the front and the guy singing walking behind her. That's the biggest concept that most independent Bengali music producers seem to come up with. But unlike these people, think of the kind of video concepts that you saw in Tomal Kanti Haldar's videos. Aren't they brilliant? Most comments in live stream, I see most people who type more. Oh, nice. Highest comments, acha. Oh, good to have you back, Ninar. Okay, let's continue now. Divya, we are discussing immigration, legal or illegal.
Whatever you can do, I don't think that actually follows. I think that if we recognize that taxation is theft, and we recognize that governments are built off aggression, they built and maintained public property with tax dollars that they took at the threat of violence from the American people. And what the American people want them to do with those tax dollars ought to play somewhat of a role. Now, I'm not arguing, as some other libertarians have, and I think they overstate the case a little bit, that public property is owned by the taxpayers or owned by the net taxpayers. I'm simply arguing that the American people have a better claim than others do, which is really, I think, the fundamental, what property rights kind of starts as. But the idea that if the American government is doing something, it ought to be for the American people. It ought to be in their interest. It's if there is a local public school and there's a group of people in the community who have been paying property taxes into this school for many, many years, I think that school ought to serve those people's interests and not equally the interests of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, there's nowhere in libertarian principles where you can deduce that because I stole something from you, it is now unowned or owned equally by everyone in the world. If taxation is theft and everything that the government has built and maintained has been done so by robbing the American people, well then, the rightful owners are still the American people. Now, I'm not saying it's completely possible to divvy that up perfectly, but you know it's definitely possible to not do what 95+% of the American people don't want, which is to open the borders. And I would say this, I'll try to leave on this, which is a thought experiment. I did not come up with this, it was the great Scott Horton, but I've been known for regurgitating his stuff in the past, and I'm not going to stop now. Imagine, if you will, I know this is an extreme to paint a picture, but imagine there's a little conflict right now between India and Pakistan. They both have nuclear weapons. Pakistan nukes India. Somehow India is able to get 500 million people who want to immigrate here. They all come. 500 million all come to America. Is it really the libertarian position? And let's say, hypothetically, 100% of the American people don't want them. We don't want this to happen. Is the libertarian position really, sorry, you lose your country. There's nothing you're allowed to do. You will now culturally and racially and religiously, every tradition that you have is gone. You live in a completely different country now, and you know what? You have to take that. And even if very powerful people happen to be funding it because they like that for their agenda, if the libertarian position is that you have to take that, we have all messed up somewhere along the lines. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave. You generously was allowed by you.
Dave Smith for debating tonight.
Okay, let me check some comments once again. Karthik is saying wokeism destroyed my favorite Star Wars series. What do you think? Yes, it absolutely did. By the way, if you are a Star Wars fan, I'm glad to know you are. Check out the performance of John Williams just conducting with an orchestra. It's not really his orchestra. He was just invited as an honorary thing to conduct, even though the orchestra already knew all the parts by heart anyway. To do a show for just John Williams' compositions, okay? There, check out John Williams' the performance of the Darth Vader Death March. It's called Death March, right? No, it's not Death March. Imperial March, yeah. Imperial March, Darth Vader theme, and the Jurassic Park theme, okay? Search on YouTube by typing John Williams Imperial March live in Vienna, okay? Check out the Vienna concert. The auditorium is what creates that sound texture. Let me guarantee you this. You have never heard a better audio quality performance of the Imperial March and Jurassic Park than the one I'm recommending here, okay? Live in Vienna. It's a small indoor auditorium. Looks about 200-300 years old. But the reverb that comes across, happens in the walls of that auditorium is what Western classical music is all about. You can't do Western classical music with that kind of reverb. Another thing I wanted to respond to, Retro is saying Tamalda is Haldar. No, that's why the BBKs hate him. How truly hateful they are. Let me tell you a secret. Tamalda actually dislikes that argument. We actually got into a debate on Tollywood regarding that one day, and many people got offended. Many BBK musicians whom I'm on good terms with, they got offended, and Tamalda also got offended that we are blaming BBKs at all because all the best musicians in Tollywood are BBK, etc. He is not BBK, by the way, okay? He is scheduled caste, and he himself said that, see, I'm a scheduled caste and I'm pretty successful. I said that, well, Tamalda, you are probably not successful enough because you are not BBK, but it's not because of caste that he has been kept out or something, right? That's what none of them in the comment section realized. I am not saying that someone is not giving Tamalda projects because he's Haldar. Oh my god, stay away, bro. That's not what's happening. I think there are subconscious biases in the minds of everyone, and you can't really get through into Tollywood unless you have the tastes and the vibes of BBKs, which I don't think Tamalda has. And therefore, probably, something always ticks people off. Not everyone. Most people who have worked with Tamalda absolutely love him. He is always getting hired by BBKs only, but only to this extent and only now, etc. And he would say that no, if he had said yes to many commercially lucrative projects, which most people don't want to do, he would have received fame. But my point is, why couldn't he receive fame by the stuff that he is good at, which is original, which is objectively good, I guess? Why not that? Why does he have to bend to BBK sensibilities? Because that's the mainstream, right? But then, can we ignore that BBKism is at least a thing in Kolkata? If that is so, then my argument works. Why don't we have pro-immigration right wing in India? We now do, apparently, because some people in Libertarian Party of India are advocating for that. Ash Ketchum is saying these liberts should recognize the concept of co-evolution. There is economics and then there is culture ideas, but not so genetics. A critical mass of immigrant population reflect different values. Yeah. Karthik is saying a pretty coincidence. I watched this just 2 days ago. I don't know. It's John Williams. Oh, okay. Dave's position is that libertarianism ठीक है, मगर अपने देश में. We need a capitalism-loving party in India, like the Swatantra Party we previously had. Yes, there exists one. It's called the Libertarian Party of India. They have come on our podcast many times. You can follow them on Twitter. Rutvik is saying concerning Hobbits is the greatest movie soundtrack of all time. Arey, Howard Shore ke fan. What's Dave's? These are the comments, right? Okay, let's get back to the video now.
Right. I will make 3 points in this debate.
Now, we are not going to listen to this at 1.25, okay? He speaks pretty fast. And now we are going to listen to the arguments that are on our opposite side. So let's be more careful here.
Libertarian first principles require the free movement of peaceful and healthy people. 2, evidence shows that immigration is beneficial to Americans. And 3, government immigration restrictions are how tyranny will come to the United States. Dave is defending the resolution, quote, government restrictions on the immigration of peaceful...
Let me make one criticism of this person's arguments before he even starts. Recognize a pattern. I am always in I'm always a bit careful of people who love the name of their ideology more than effectiveness, okay? So, because at that point it becomes simply sloganeering. So you will now notice that this sentence that let's say, being overprotective about your country is the way that America will get to despotism and stuff. This is the sentence that he keeps on saying about 3-4 times. You will recognize a pattern. Take a shot every time he says this, okay? Notice this sloganeering. He says it like a mantra.
Restrictions are how tyranny will come to the United States.
This.
Dave is defending the resolution, quote, government restrictions on the immigration of peaceful and healthy people make sense from a libertarian standpoint, especially in present-day America, unquote. That resolution is nonsensical from a libertarian position. Dave would see it clearly if he were asked to support resolutions with a one-word difference, like, quote, government restrictions on the private property, or drug use, or gun ownership of peaceful and healthy people make sense from a libertarian standpoint, especially in present-day America. But he doesn't see it when it comes to immigration. Every strand of libertarian thought, from natural rights theory to ethical intuitionism and consequentialism, requires free movement, because immigration laws are government rules that attack our rights and restrict peaceful, voluntary exchange. Government restrictions on the immigration of peaceful and healthy people violates every strand of libertarian thought. Immigration laws are government regulations enforced by the state. We're not talking about trespassers on private property. We're talking about government laws and regulations that prevent you, all of you, from using your property as you see fit and from voluntarily interacting with others. Every immigration restriction infringes both on the rights of the immigrants and on your rights to associate with them. Libertarians care about first principles, but we also care about the consequences. We begin with a presumption of liberty, which can be overcome if immigration causes serious harm. Now, that's not the case here. Immigration consequences are overwhelmingly positive. Empirical economic research shows that immigrants pay more in taxes than they consume in benefits, or, at worst, break even. That includes costs like government schools, welfare, and criminal justice, which they all use less than native-born Americans. They are less likely to be arrested, convicted of crimes, and incarcerated.
What I was saying is, remember that they are right now conflating illegal immigration with legal immigration. Although that is the tone of the debate, the main agenda of the debate, but it's still a bit unfair to talk about this in this tone, because the legal immigration data that he's using, they are legal immigration data, right? That I think so, at least. Overwhelmingly, it's legal immigration. And America's legal immigration data will always look good because there are so many Indians there who are law-abiding citizens paying into taxes, etc. But that data that he just put forward is going to be used to justify illegal immigration as well from Pakistan or Mexico. So they are not the same things, not the same people.
Now, that's not the case here. Immigration consequences are overwhelmingly positive. Empirical economic research shows that immigrants pay more in taxes than they consume in benefits, or, at worst, break even. That includes costs like government schools, welfare, and criminal justice, which they all use less than native-born Americans. They are less likely to be arrested, convicted of crimes, and incarcerated. Historically, more open immigration is associated with slower growth in the size of the federal government. At the state level, more immigration is either not related to changes in economic freedom or positively correlated. Benjamin Powell and I won an award for the best book in Austrian economics in 2022 for showing that immigration mostly increases economic freedom or has no effect. Immigrants are stopping socialism. They are not spreading it. Some immigrants use welfare in public schools. That's absolutely true. The libertarian response is to abolish the welfare state, not to expand government control over the borders. The problem is the government services, not the immigrants. Social Security's problem isn't the elderly, it's the government program itself. The problem with public schools isn't the children, it's the government schools. The problem with immigrant welfare use is the welfare state, not the immigrants. The far less extreme way to deal with this, rather than building a wall around.
To be fair to anarcho-capitalists here, a lot of the pull factor for illegal immigration is the freebies of the government only, okay? If they go away in a libertarian situation, even in a non-crazy libertarian situation, a lot of pull factor goes away immediately anyway. A whole lot of less amounts of people even want to come in the first place to that country, which does not give away so much freebies for people. Remember that.
Around the country, we should build a higher wall around the welfare state. Immigration restrictions are how tyranny will come to modern America. Dave has said in previous podcasts and other forums that he wants a full repeal of the progressive era. Now, I agree. The progressive era instituted immigration restrictions and passports to protect labor unions, promote nationalism, and adopt a U.S. government central plan of eugenics based on the science. America's borders were mostly closed to immigration from the late 1920s to the late 1960s. And what did we get during that time, huh? What great libertarian wonders? The New Deal, labor law, government enforced monopolies, union subsidies,
Sarcasm here.
the peacetime draft, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, Japanese internment, the CIA entangling foreign alliances like NATO, the military-industrial complex, the Great Society, and civil rights laws that restricted freedom of association, infringed on our private property, and expanded the state to previously unimagined size. That
Karthik is saying,
that anti-libertarian.
is it possible to stop illegal immigration without aggression? Yes, there is, which is the one I just said. Believe me, if today the government stops giving out rations, freebies, Lokir Bhandar, etc., immediately, I think illegal immigration from Bangladesh at least will lessen by 50-60%. All of them come here and get fake voter cards and Aadhaar cards and then are happy with their freebies. The freebies are a major attraction for coming to India illegally. Bangladesh is jumping borders for Lokir Bhandar. Exactly. How will immigration reduction bring more tyranny? That's a very interesting point, and I had never thought about it, but he does argue it and explain it later on a little better, okay? Because then you are the population of the country is at the mercy of the government in a way, and the government does not feel any pressure of handling more people, so they can use these fixed numbers of people and make them do whatever they want, etc. The argument is kind of that, okay? We'll get to details later on. Srijan is saying you should ask people to subscribe or like at some point. I have PTSD about that from my music career, so I don't do that here. This is my sort of personal glory that I have reached 15,000 subscribers without asking anyone to like or share or subscribe even once, and I hope to keep this up. The only thing I'm now asking people for is that Kalbhairavashtakam funding. Rishabh is saying, Ireland and Italy are next to New York City. All of them came into the US during that time and they created the mafia. Nina is saying also that the freebies prevent assimilation since it gives incentive to not work. Ye argument to kisi ko sunna hi nahi hai. What a very important point Nina is making here, guys. This is so fucking important. फ्रीबीज लेके और लोगों का दिमाग गर्म करते हैं और काम करना ही नहीं है. काम करने के लिए तुमको इंटरमिंगल करना पड़ता लोकल पॉपुलेशन के साथ. वो सब भोसड़ी के बंद हो रहा है या फिर नहीं होगा अगर फ्रीबी मिलते रहे तो. Ashkesh is saying moderate immigration leads to despotism. That's a non sequitur from Alex right from the start. Yeah.
Time in American history was made possible by immigration restrictions and the practically closed borders that they instituted. Don't believe me? Well, listen to what libertarian wonders. The New Deal, labor law, government enforced monopolies, union subsidies, the peacetime draft, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, Japanese internment, the CIA, entangling foreign alliances like NATO, the military-industrial complex, the Great Society, and civil rights laws that restricted freedom of association, infringed on our private property, and expanded the state to previously unimagined size. That anti-libertarian time in American history was made possible by immigration restrictions and the practically closed borders that they instituted. Don't believe me? Well, listen to what Paul Krugman said. Quote, "The New Deal made America a vastly better place." I'm quoting him, by the way. Yet it probably wouldn't have been possible without immigration restrictions. Absent those restrictions, there would have been many claims, justified or not, about people flocking to America to take advantage of welfare programs, unquote. The Great Society was passed when the immigrant share of the U.S. population was the lowest in American history, including the colonial period. And that low point was caused by immigration restrictions on the movement of peaceful and healthy people. The Immigration Act of 1965 slightly, just slightly, liberalized immigration. And what happened after then? Union subsidies fell. Labor law was liberalized. You're noticing a pattern here. I really don't like unions. The number of government monopolies fell. Growth in the size of government actually slowed. Taxes were cut. Trade was liberalized, and the draft was abolished. Those liberalizations did not happen when the borders were closed. They only happened after they were slightly, barely reopened. Immigration restrictions are the health of the state and a declaration of war on our freedoms. They are also some of the most economically devastating, complex, and Soviet-style laws in the United States. You may have noticed there's a piece of paper on your chairs, a very highly simplified map of the legal immigration system. And it is simplified, and it's only part of it. But the point to understand about immigration law is it is the exact opposite of every other portion of American law and our Anglo-Saxon system of jurisprudence. Every other portion of law, it says specifically what is not allowed. But everything else is fine. There's no law that says Dave and I can shake hands, right? But there's a law that says he can't punch me in the face. Okay, that makes sense. Immigration law is the opposite. It says all immigration is illegal except what the government specifically allows. If you fit into a narrow Soviet-style category, then maybe if you apply and wait 20, 30, 50 years, yeah, you can get in. Otherwise, there is no way for you to come in. It is the opposite of our legal traditions. To support government immigration restrictions and mass deportations means that you must also support the methods of actually enforcing those laws. These enforcement methods are some of the most anti-libertarian laws in existence. Examples: Trump designated drug cartels as terrorists and is considering designating some gang members arrested inside of the U.S. as enemy combatants to stop immigration. Trump wanted to send U.S. troops to Mexico to fight a war against terrorist cartels. He deployed the military to the border. He used the Alien Enemies Act to deport migrants to prison camps in El Salvador without due process. The Alien Enemies Act allows federal officers, ICE agents, to enter houses without a warrant to arrest migrants the president designates as terrorists or invaders. Most federal law enforcement officers actually work to enforce immigration laws. Every time you travel, you must show your papers. Every time you get a job, you must fill out the I-9 form to prove to the government that you are complying with immigration laws. Many states and the federal government require employers to check your papers against federal databases through the E-Verify system when you apply for a job. And, mark my words, E-Verify will be used for gun checks. It's just a matter of time. Every significant proposal for a national biometric identity card is designed to enforce immigration laws. There are vaccine mandates for immigrants. The government is deporting green card holders, like Mahmoud Khalil, arrested without a warrant, by the way. The government lied about that, of course, because he expressed an opinion that contradicts American foreign policy toward Israel. Foreign students, like Rumeysa Ozturk, are being deported for for writing op-eds critical of Israel. A French scientist was denied entry for a scientific conference because he had phone messages critical of President Trump. America has a secret gulag for immigration offenders. A German green card holder named Fabian Schmidt lives in New Hampshire. He was arrested, held incommunicado, and literally tortured by ICE. He ended up in the hospital. They tried to make him sign a paper to give up his green card.
Wow.
Irish green card holder Cleona Ward, arrested and held for 17 days after returning for the U.S. And you know what she did? They found that she had a 20-year-old marijuana charge in a state that had recently legalized marijuana.
Yeesh.
An Australian on a work permit returned from a funeral in his home country was arrested by customs and deported for no good reason, separated from his job, his apartment, his property, and his spouse. 2 other German tourists, a Canadian with a visa, and several Brits were disappeared for weeks in immigration detention and not allowed to contact lawyers. Other German tourists were searched, detained, deported after arriving legally because Trump's customs agents didn't think their travel schedules were detailed enough. A Russian scientist at Harvard named Ksenia Petrova was detained by ICE for 8 weeks for the heinous crime of failing to deport frog embryos as part of her research on a flight from France. Trump shipped migrants, 40% of whom have no criminal convictions or charges against them, to America's prison camp in Guantanamo Bay. Trump activated the Wartime Enemy Aliens Act to deport non-criminal migrants, 20% of whom weren't even illegal immigrants, with limited or no due process, to El Salvador's prisons and bribed the government there with your tax dollars to take them in. One man was deported illegally, and when a judge ruled he had to be returned, Trump's administration said, sorry, we can't do anything about it. Trump's administration lawyers wrote in a March 14th memo that the Alien Entities Act allows ICE agents to enter private property without a warrant. The government is using eminent domain to take private property from people along the border to build a wall. Libertarians who support mass deportations are not defending private property rights. They are really defending the power of the government to violate your private property. ICE arrested a native-born American citizen by pulling him off the street in Chicago into an unmarked van and held him overnight until they checked his wallet to discover he was a citizen. Native-born American Jose Hermosillo was arrested in Arizona and held in immigration detention for 10 days incommunicado because he wasn't carrying his papers. Immigration enforcers go to schools, churches, courthouses to arrest peaceful people, operate with near impunity in a 100-mile buffer zone along America's borders, where they run internal checkpoints, harass Americans and immigrants, and frequently enter private property.
The reason I paused here was to point out that yes, America is doing a bunch of overcorrections, and they are overcorrections, but they are making a statement. They are showing off. They are basically pretty much doing it just only symbolically, and making an example out of these people, so that this is the way. They think this is the way to discourage illegal immigration to their country, and also discourage legal immigration for some reason to their country, instead of doing the other ways to discourage it. But they are doing these violation of civil liberties as the way to discourage immigration. But you see, my bet is that they are doing it just symbolically, and setting an example sake, just to keep their voter base happy. They are not going to kick out all of the immigrants. They don't want to. And I think that's the case with illegal Bangladeshis as well. Someone was asking, yeah, it's fine now, right? Yeah. So someone was asking how to, can even illegal Bangladeshi immigrants be kicked out from India? I don't think the government wants to. I think only symbolic numbers will be kicked out. I don't think everyone getting kicked out, all Bangladeshis or Pakistanis getting kicked out, is going to be accepted by local politicians who are in cahoots with local businessmen who employ those people, okay? I don't think Indians should hold their breath, right-wingers should hold their breath and wait for the day that all Bangladeshi illegal immigrants will be kicked out. I don't think that day is ever coming, guys. But he is pointing out some great overcorrection examples from Trump.
American citizen by pulling him off the street in Chicago into an unmarked van and held him overnight until they checked his wallet to discover he was a citizen. Native-born American Jose Hermosillo was arrested in Arizona and held in immigration detention for 10 days incommunicado because he wasn't carrying his papers. Immigration enforcers go to schools, churches, courthouses to arrest peaceful people, operate with near impunity in a 100-mile buffer zone along America's borders where they run internal checkpoints, harass Americans and immigrants, and frequently enter private property without permission. ICE agents make arrests without warrants and then just create them for themselves in the field after the arrests. ICE recently bragged that part of its job is keeping out, quote, ideas that cross our borders illegally, unquote. Show your papers to travel near the border. Carry your papers or you'll be in ICE detention for weeks. Show your papers to get a job, all for immigration enforcement. The U.S. is becoming a your papers please society to enforce immigration laws of the type that Dave is defending tonight. Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, said the administration was considering suspending the writ of habeas corpus because we're being invaded by illegal immigrants. Finally, Trump and his press secretary have said that they are considering deporting American citizens to prison camps in El Salvador.
Yeah.
You heard me right. They are considering deporting American citizens to prison camps in El Salvador. The last person to try to exercise this much power here was named George III. If tyranny comes to the United States, it will come to enforce immigration laws. Immigration laws can only be enforced by the heavy hand of the federal government. Do you really think all that is consistent with libertarianism? Dave endorsed mass deportations even over a month ago. Mass deportations require taking money from taxpayers at force and hiring unionized federal law enforcement officers to arrest people.
I think all ideologues fall into this trap that he is kind of falling into, and I think they should try to avoid it. I think everyone should try to avoid it, which is pitting the entire argument on the basis of, or on the shoulders of, are you libertarian enough? Do you have the right to call yourself a libertarian if you support or don't support X, Y, Z? Now, the debate ideally should have been whether illegal immigration is, whether immigration is a good thing or a bad thing. The debate repeatedly ends up touching upon the idea of whether Dave Smith is a proper libertarian or not. Is he a true TROO libertarian or not? That's, I think, a waste of everybody's time.
Rip them away from their families and property. In Trump's America, mass deportations require paying foreign autocrats taxpayer dollars to incarcerate non-criminals. Would Murray Rothbard or Ludwig von Mises support that? We got the populist immigration enforcement regime that Dave wants, and it's leading the United States on a dark road. Hearing people defend these immigration restrictions and the enforcement system that supports them makes people sound like they're defending COVID regime in May of 2020 or the Iraq War in 2006. Give it up. Immigration restrictions must be statist, and they can be populist. They can be conservative, progressive, nationalistic, socialistic, or autocratic, but they cannot be libertarian. Ron Paul recently said, quote, President Trump announced earlier in his second term that foreign students who engaged in illegal activity would be deported. Most people agreed with this. But then his DHS began showing up with masks in plain clothes and arresting people. It's a slippery slope that will backfire on those who support it, unquote. Shortly after Ron Paul said that, Dave Smith said, I support mass deportations. Ron Paul is correct.
It might be a slippery slope to some things, but remember that the slippery slope argument is itself a slippery slope because you might end up using it on anything and everything, because done in extremes, taken to logical conclusions, etc., everything can end up being a slippery slope where you don't want to end up.
Dave is wrong. They may want mass deportations without the atrocities, but communists say they want equality to support it, unquote. Shortly after Ron Paul said that, Dave Smith said, I support mass deportations. Ron Paul is correct, Dave is wrong. They may want mass deportations without the atrocities, but communists say they want equality without the starvation and death camps too.
Right.
In both cases, the trade-off is our liberty. Immigration restrictions break a lot of eggs. For a libertarian to support those violations of rights, the government's mass deportation regime had better be.
There's a verbal sleight of hand that he just did. He said that it was a pretty cool analogy that, yeah, even commies want to do equality without harming you, and you are saying you want to kick out illegal immigrants without harming them. But the similarity in both cases is that they come at the cost of our civil liberties. The only difference here, the only problem here is who is the our here. That part has not been defined so far. That part has not been clarified so far. In the end, we know Dave Smith's our are the American citizens. This guy's our are the people of the entire world, which is why it's a problem. Which is why he's going to always, I think, keep falling in the same trap over and over again. Anyone who debates on this point will end up doing that.
They want mass deportations without the...
Now, if you don't base your argument on the concept of our, and you keep it to your personal interests, your incentives, etc., then you could have done a better job at this debate. But the moment you bring in our, and you are saying that yes, it's our civil liberties which are getting hampered, then we will have to get into, okay, who's our, bro? Your our versus my our. We don't even agree upon the our, and your our is not even a group inside the country. Your our is the entire world. So this was funny. The day, I think, for the first time, Libertarian Party of India started getting some gathering some steam on Twitter. The first thing, a lot of Hindutwadis were congratulating them as well that, yes, we like the idea of libertarianism. We heard about it on College Street, Kolkata. Let's think of how to fuse these two, etc. Idiot libertarians came and started debating with our viewers, said that, oh, you are from a collectivist ideology, how can you be libertarian? तो लवड़े, हम libertarian है, ये sentence का meaning क्या है, implication क्या है, what does it entail? You are a group of people who wants no taxes or low taxes and wants the borders to be opened, or wants to keep the borders but wants strict law and order. You are a fucking group. You are a collectivist group who wants those things. You can never go out of complete group identity. You are a libertarian group now. And you have an hour here, apparently, from an anarcho-capitalist.
Without the atrocities, but communists say they want equality without the starvation and death camps too. In both cases, the trade-off is our liberty. Immigration restrictions break a lot of eggs. For a libertarian to support those violations of rights, the government's mass deportation regime had better be cooking up a pretty tasty libertarian omelet. Dave has not made any argument these rights violations and increased state power will do so. Even if you don't care about immigrants, whatever they do to immigrants, they're going to do to you eventually. The worst infringement on the liberties of Americans in our lifetime was the COVID lockdowns. Horrible tyranny, unspeakable and unimaginable that we lived through that in this country. Immigration restrictions, I just have a few more seconds, of the kind Dave defends are like a permanent global COVID lockdown, complete with a vaccine passport. Mass deportations and immigration restrictions require a domestic police state like the one we're seeing growing up around us. He desires the government deporting people who broke immigration restrictions, so he desires a tax-funded internal security state to do so. Dave can defend statist mass deportations if he wishes. He can defend permanent global COVID-style immigration lockdowns on peaceful and healthy people if he wants, but he cannot do so while claiming to represent libertarianism. Thank you.
Thank you. 5 minutes.
It's not like he did not really explain why immigration is good for America, but many times he used just as a slogan the fact that America will become more despotic just because of immigration control, or the fact that Dave Smith is not a good enough libertarian. He's not libertarian enough. That has been one of his key arguments, and that is a very bad thing.
5 minutes rebuttal from Dave. Take it away, Dave.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, listen, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit surprised with Alex's opening. I think if the resolution tonight was Trump's doing a great job with his immigration enforcement, that would have been a very powerful opening. I think if the resolution was, should libertarians support mass deportations, he would have at least started to make the argument there. But really just nothing is touching the resolution that we're actually here to argue. Which is, the question really is, do we have to embrace an immigration system that would undoubtedly result in an orders of magnitude increase in the number of immigrants coming into this country against the wishes of almost all of the American people? That's really the question, and nothing that he said really touches my argument, so I'll be interested to see his rebuttal. I guess there's a few things that I should respond to. number one, I will say, I think this is a bit goofy, the direction Alex went in terms of saying that, like, when the periods of large immigration, the government was being reduced, and during periods of slow immigration, therefore that's responsible for the things that followed. The truth is that the way, I'm pretty sure, because I've listened to some of his presentations on this topic, the way Alex is calculating whether the size of government grew or shrank is by government spending as a percentage of GDP, which no libertarian should ever use as a metric for how you rate how big or small the government is. It's on the level of, like, if I made $100,000 a year and I have one gun, that's my home security, is my gun. And then the next year I got a big raise and now I make $1 million a year. So I got 5 more guns. And then a friend of mine would go, hey, you sure got a lot more guns. And I'd go, actually, I have less guns as a percentage of GDP.
Yeah.
But the point is you have more guns, right? So if you want to look at, since 1965 and the immigration reforms, the size and scope of government has enormously grown. And I don't know if you've been looking around and haven't noticed it, but we haven't had a smaller government as we've been having more immigrants come into the country. In addition to that, I think that listen, if we have time to get into some of this, I'm happy to. I'm very skeptical about a lot of the claims that Alex makes, and we could get into the studies. I've read through them in terms of immigrants committing less crime or immigrants contributing more than they take out of welfare programs. This is actually kind of misleading to make those claims, and I think if you actually look at the data, it might be the case, but is not really conclusive, actually. But I just want to be very clear. All of that is completely beside the point. That has nothing to do with how libertarians ought to feel about this. The only question that really matters is, do the American people have more of a claim over America than the rest of the world does?
Right.
Because if that's true, then the question is this a voluntary transaction? So in other words, I do stand-up comedy. I tour on the road all the time. I go out about 2 weekends a month. Now, believe me, if it was up to my agent, I would be out every single day. He would have me at some strip mall every single.
Now, Dave is making one strawman argument here. He's pretending like the other guy, Alex, did not make a single argument in favor of immigration even for America's benefit, which is not the case. He did explain that. And another problem here I see with Dave is that, again, he is appealing to democracy, whether the maximum amount of people like it or not. That's also not the way to do it. Then the legit fair rebuttal is that, well, bro, you're not libertarian enough. The debate here should be just about whether immigration is good for the country or not. Nothing else.
Weekend, I would work nonstop because he'll make more money if I do that. And the truth is, I'll make more money if I do that. But I got 2 little kids and a wife, and I kind of like spending time with them. So I limit now, if someone came and put a gun to my head and said, you got to get out on the road every single day, I would make more money. That would be better for my GDP. But it's not libertarian. The question is it a voluntary transaction or not? And in terms of whether, even if immigrants do commit less crime, which again, this is all based on the Texas homicide numbers, it's not very clear that this is the case.
A very important point being mentioned here by Rishabh. Immigrants will go along with lower standards of liberty because they have a better life now with that discount on liberty than the citizens of the US. So this is basically wage suppression in the field of liberty, which is what Indians always do. How else are people working in China, Singapore, Oman, Dubai, Qatar, where civil liberties are way lesser than what we have on paper in India? कैसे सुधर गए वहाँ जाके? Absolutely, because they are happy with it, because the other stuff they are getting in return, that's way better than what they are getting in India. But what about the people in those countries? Now, these specific countries have not seen or known the spelling of the word liberty ever in their lives, so inko chhod dete hain. But what about the people of the West who know what liberty is, and they will now have to live with lesser liberty because illegal immigrants are here who don't give a shit about liberty.
Single day, I would make more money. That would be better for my GDP. But it's not libertarian. The question is it a voluntary transaction or not? And in terms of whether, even if immigrants do commit less crime, which again, this is all based on the Texas homicide numbers, it's not very clear that this is the case. But if it's true that immigrants commit less crime, that still does not matter. Listen, Ann Coulter, who is not right about everything, but I did really like this example. She's the one who said, and I think she's right about this in her framework more than Alex is. Saying that immigrants commit fewer crime is kind of like if you had some food in your refrigerator and 50% of it was rotten. And then you went to the supermarket and you said, the food I got at the supermarket is only 20% rotten. Isn't that great? You'd be like, no. Because the expectation is the food that you're voluntarily bringing in is supposed to be 0% rotten. You're just bringing more rotten food in here. Even if illegal immigrants commit...
This analogy is not completely correct here. The anarcho-capitalist argument here would be, in terms of just this analogy at least, why it's wrong. Because the question that would be needed to be asked to that person who is going to the supermarket and complaining about 50% rotten vegetables is that how much important is the food for you? Do you have food at home and after that you got some vegetables which some of which ended up being rotten before you bought them, and therefore now you have a complaint with it? Do you have enough vegetables at home? That is the main debate. Many people would argue, many Indians and many Americans would argue that yes, we do have enough vegetables, therefore let's not go looking for many other vegetables, some of which may or may not be rotten. But Dave Smith is pretending that, or Dave Smith's point seems to be here that, well, you definitely don't have vegetables at all, therefore you had to go there. Now, what about the side effects of that 20% or 30% rotten vegetables? If you don't have any food at home, then what do? You do get a lot of vegetables, some of which are rotten. If you don't have any other source to those vegetables, remember? That would be the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist argument here. So this analogy is not really debate-proof, argument-proof.
Is kind of like if you had some food in your refrigerator and 50% of it was rotten. And then you went to the supermarket and you said, the food I got at the supermarket is only 20% rotten. Isn't that great? You'd be like, no. Because the expectation is the food that you're voluntarily bringing in is supposed to be 0% rotten. You're just bringing more rotten food in here. Even if illegal immigrants commit crime at a lower rate, that's still just more crime that we're inheriting. We already have to deal with the problems we have here. So the relevant question for...
And that can be a legitimate trade-off for the people of USA if they don't have enough labor force participation from inside their country, which they don't have actually for other screw-ups from the government.
For libertarians is not what leads to economic growth or who has a higher or lower crime rate. The question is quite simple. Do the American people, we take in more immigrants than any other country in the world, legally. Do we have a right to cap it at any number? Or is it the case that it is incumbent on us, if we believe in liberty, to say you must take in the world if the world wants to come? Thank you.
If you support immigration restrictions, then you have to support the methods of actually enforcing those laws. You can't run away from that.
Yeah.
If somebody was up here arguing that they want drug prohibition, but they don't really want the police to beat up anybody or arrest anybody, you wouldn't take it seriously, would you? Well, I don't take it seriously right now when Dave says he wants immigration restrictions, but not all that little mean stuff that the government does. He doesn't like the mean stuff that the government does. Well, you can't pick and choose like that. That's one of the reasons why we are libertarians, is because we recognize that government is a blunt instrument, and that is all it is. Now, when he talks about the rights of Americans, or the rights of Americans to choose who comes here, what he's really talking about is the power of the government. You have rights. The government does not have rights to make decisions for you. You have rights. If you want to hire somebody from overseas, if you want to marry them, you should not have to ask the government permission to do so. It is incumbent upon the government to prove that that person is a menace, or will come here and commit crimes, or will spread a virulent disease, or something like that. That is the way that we should frame these things. Not that you have to prove to the government, oh, please, can you please, let this guy in and make sure it satisfies with your central plan. No, there's no other area where we would be having this discussion when it comes to public policy. Not a single one. Immigration is the only one when it comes here. I'm also struck by Dave's consistent appeal to public opinion.
Yeah.
We're talking about what libertarians should support. I want to remind you, the resolution of the debate is, quote, government restrictions on the immigration of peaceful and healthy people make sense from a libertarian standpoint, especially in present-day America. It's not, well, does the median voter in the United States want to increase immigration? That's not the resolution. Who cares? Like, we're not debating that. We're debating what libertarians should think about this. What's the proper mode and model for libertarians to think about this very crucial issue? Now, when he makes an analogy between government property and saying, well, they should behave like they're private property owners so that they can channel somehow magically the will of the median voter, as if the median voter matters for these types of things in order to manage property, that proves too much. The median voter, and the way that they manage their property, wants all types of crazy non-libertarian things. All types of things. Most people don't have guns in their houses and don't want them. Does that mean that I can't carry my gun on the street because the median voter doesn't want that? I can't carry a gun concealed in my pocket? No libertarian would accept that response. None. But for some reason, we're supposed to accept it when it comes to an immigrant coming to the United States, who, by the way, they come here because people here want to interact with them. They want to hire them voluntarily. They want to sell stuff to them. They want to buy from them. If nobody in the United States wants anything to do with immigration, who's going to sell them a ticket to come here? Who's going to rent them an apartment? Who's going to give them a job?
Nice. This is the argument I'm talking about. कि पुल फैक्टर का जो प्रॉब्लम है वो तो बहुत दोनों देश में ही बहुत नेशनलिस्ट से भी हो रहा है, या फिर जो छुप छुप के लेफ्टिस्ट है बाहर नेशनलिस्ट है, बाहर लेफ्टिस्ट है छुप छुप के नेशनलिस्ट है, या फिर राइट विंगर है, इन सब से हो रहा है प्रॉब्लम. क्योंकि एक साइड इनको एम्प्लॉय भी कर रहा है, प्रो बिजनेस है वगैरह. ऑफ कोर्स नो मैटर हाउ प्रो बिजनेस यू आर एज अ बिजनेस मैन, यू वांट टू बी इन कहूट्स विद द लोकल पॉलिटिशियन एंड द पुलिस, राइट? एंड दैट विल हैपन टू सम डिग्री इन एवरी कंट्री. So they are the ones who want illegal immigration, and the people who advocate for a bunch of freebies for anyone and everyone, including illegal immigrants, they are also creating this pull problem. So it's both the pro-business people and the absolute commies who are keeping up, sustaining the pull factors of legal as well as illegal immigration. And that is, I think, a very important argument, because they are not going away. You are going to go on with your pull factors. You are going to keep increasing pull factors. At the same time, hope that the people wanting to come here goes away, and your last option is to just be evil to them, kill them, or deport people who are employees of USA from Ireland or Australia and send them back packing one fine morning. Just to set examples, by the way, because in the end, you are not even actually kicking out all illegal immigrants. You are doing all this for show, a stunt.
Pay them voluntarily. Nobody. This is why we like capitalism. This is why libertarians like these things, because it's voluntary. If nobody wants to buy goods and services from the immigrants, then they will not come, period. We talk about maybe hundreds of millions, billions of people coming here from around the world. Give me a break. 330 million people could move to New York tomorrow. Well, where are they? You know, if we take that logic to its extreme. We cannot look at the way that the state manages its property and reason to popularity. The real popularity is how Americans vote with their feet. It's how they vote with their dollars. And what do? They buy goods and services provided by immigrants. They hire them, they marry them, they move to cities where immigrants are disproportionately. They're not moving to West Virginia, folks. They're moving to places where there are more immigrants and there's more prosperity. The immigrants came here voluntarily. So what I want to say is, you know, there are absolutely concerns about these things. Oh, and by the way that we measure government growth over time and the size of the government, we have lots of different analyses in our books. The percentage of GDP, government spending as a percentage of GDP. We look at the economic freedom scores that have been calculated by organizations like Fraser and Cato. We look at other economic freedom scores calculated by Heritage. We look at the state level scores that are done by Jason Sorens and other people. So we have numerous different ways to take a look at the size of government. It's not just that. But what I want to just say is, if this were any other topic of public policy, if this were drugs.
This is a great comment by Ash Ketchum here. He's saying, because America hasn't opened up the borders, bro. He's saying that where are the 300 million? Where are the 300 million? खुलने दो, जो recommend कर रहे हो वो अगर हो जाए तब ये सब नहीं रहेगा. This is kind of a libertarian and anarcho-capitalist standing on the shoulders of nationalists and then saying that, see, the country is so great, can it really get worse since we have these things, etc. But those things, those X, Y, Zs are there because they don't listen to you. This reminds me of Bernie Sanders. Forever he has gone on saying America is the most richest, most prosperous country in the history of mankind. So why shouldn't we give freebies? Well, they are most richest, prosperous, etc. because they don't listen to your policies. They are not a freebie centered country. That's why they are not Bernie Sanders like in their politics. Therefore, they have the money which now you want for freebies, which will lead to having a country which can then not give out freebies or give freebies to the extent of India, etc. and then go to hell. Koch brothers, yes. Mayuresh is saying Dada didn't get the notification so joined late. Yeah, ऐसा तो होता ही रहता है. Ash Rishabh is saying this is a simplistic. Then why was the mafia formed? Why are the cartels operating there? Those immigrants didn't come in because someone wanted to interact. Yeah. And Rishabh is saying, and the point isn't if immigrants do crime, it is, are they destroying the way of life of US citizens, and the government of the US should prioritize protecting the ways of life of its citizens. ऋषभ, ये स्टेटमेंट तो ठीक है, मैं तो अग्री करता हूँ, मगर इसके लिए और थोड़ा फ्लैश्ड आउट आर्ग्यूमेंट चाहिए होगा, क्योंकि लिबर्टेरियन तुमको अनार्को कैपिटलिस्ट तुमसे पूछेगा कि व्हाट इज दिस वेग आइडिया ऑफ अ वे ऑफ लाइफ, बिकॉज आई एज एन अनार्को कैपिटलिस्ट एज ऑल्सो थिंक दैट दिस इज माई वे ऑफ लाइफ, दैट आई बिलीव इन अनार्को कैपिटलिज्म. तो अब क्या एक पब्लिक सर्वे होगा ऑन व्हाट एग्जैक्टली एंटेल्स द आइडिया ऑफ वे ऑफ लाइफ, वहाँ पे तो तुम जानते हो इंडिया में क्या होगा. तो और कोई बेटर आर्ग्यूमेंट ढूंढना पड़ेगा ऑन दिस लाइन एटलीस्ट. Divya is saying, Dada, do you support a UFC fighter union if you are aware about the fighter? I have never considered that a problem, guys. Divya, I have been hearing about that since the day I started following UFC. I followed Morning Combat extensively. I even still now till now like Morning Combat, but he is obviously a leftist, right? What's his name? I forgot. Luke Thomas. So Luke Thomas obviously really supports fighters union and etc. But the key factor that they go on forgetting, they go on criticizing UFC for, is why is the percentage of the profits so small to UFC fighters compared to all other fight promotions, which is a horseshit argument, because all other fight promotions, the margins of their profits, even revenue, is incredibly low when compared to UFC. No one even comes fucking close to UFC. Okay? So what ends up happening is, for the non-MMA people here, UFC pays, let's say, 1% of the profit and you go home with $1,000. Bellator pays you 5%, 10% of the profit and you go home with $500 or $100, okay? Because that fight promotion is just not that popular. Okay, तो कैसे होगा? So there's no point of unions. You don't like this amount of pay, these percentages, go to Bellator, go to One, go to Thailand. तुमको जो आई बॉल्स चाहिए यूएफसी में, उसका ही पेमेंट है जो तुमको परसेंटेज कम मिल रहा है प्रॉफिट का, ठीक है. एंड नॉट टू मेंशन यूएफसी में फाइट करने से जो ब्रांड डील्स मिलेंगे वो तुम्हें बेलाटोर में नहीं मिलेंगे. यूएफसी में फाइट करने की वजह से तुमको जो फ्री ट्रेनिंग फैसिलिटीज़ मिलेगा UFC PIs में, हर देश में एक बहुत देशों में तो बहुत एक से ज़्यादा PIs है, पर्सनल ट्रेनिंग सेंटर्स, वो सब क्या बेलाटोर दे पाएगा तुम्हें? तो बेलाटोर का पैसा नहीं चाहिए, बेलाटोर जैसा आई बॉल्स नहीं चाहिए, बेलाटोर जैसा ट्रेनिंग फैसिलिटीज़ नहीं चाहिए, बेलाटोर जैसा सिर्फ प्रॉफिट का परसेंटेज चाहिए, सिर्फ और सिर्फ परसेंटेज चाहिए, जो परसेंटेज तुम्हें नहीं मिलता है क्योंकि डेना वाइट को पैसे बनाने हैं और बाकी लोगों को और लोगों को खुश करना है और फिर तुमको फैसिलिटीज़ भी ज़्यादा देना है. वो तो नहीं, कैसे होगा भाई? और वहाँ से और पैसा निकाल के. और रिमेंबर, डेना वाइट डज नॉट डू एवरीथिंग ऑन द बुक्स. हाउ द फक डिड Khabib not get arrested that night after the Conor fight? The deal was that Khabib has to pay a $500,000 fine, even though he broke every law that could have sent him to jail that very moment. He did not go to a jail. Okay, it's because of Dana White's connections. I can imagine the number of people Dana White might have bribed that night. सो ये सब कनेक्शंस के लिए, ये सब प्रोटेक्शन, ये सब के लिए तो भाई उससे ज़्यादा परसेंटेज पॉइंट्स में नहीं मिलेगा प्रॉफिट का.
Immigrants. They hire them, they marry them, they move to cities where immigrants are disproportionately. They're not moving to West Virginia, folks. They're moving to places where there are more immigrants and there's more prosperity. The immigrants came here voluntarily. So what I want to say is, you know, there are absolutely concerns about these things. Oh, and by the way that we measure government growth over time and the size of the government, we have lots of different analyses in our books, the percentage of GDP, government spending as a percentage of GDP. We look at the economic freedom scores that have been calculated by organizations like Fraser and Cato. We look at other economic freedom scores calculated by Heritage. We look at the state level scores.
Divya, I would like to correct you on something. Assaulting Connor, that did not start with Khabib's team, okay? I know the footage, existing footage that we have, all the audience camera footages, etc. There it looks that way. Islam crossed the barricade, then Khabib's manager, what's his name, I forgot, that young, tall, fair-skinned guy, from Dagestan only. He also got in and started beating Connor up. That's not what happened, okay? One guy who was sitting right in front of Connor on the net, okay? What's it called? I forgot. On the barricade basically, or the rings of the octagon, okay? That guy from Khabib's team gets up. He's trying to see what the fuck is going on there, okay? Khabib beating up Dylan Dennis. Out of the blue, Connor slaps that guy first and foremost, and then Khabib's, and that footage I saw from some other footage that's now deleted. I think that was the official UFC footage, okay? If you find the footage of the full fight officially from UFC cameras, you will notice that Connor was the first one to lay hands on the rest of the team of Khabib. Then all of them beat up Connor, which was visible in the camera footage, in the mobile footages, okay? So it was basically Connor who initiated that. After obviously Khabib took it to hell.
These things. Oh, and by the way that we measure government growth over time and the size of the government, we have lots of different analyses in our books, the percentage of GDP, government spending as a percentage of GDP. We look at the economic freedom scores that have been calculated by organizations like Fraser and Cato. We look at other economic freedom scores calculated by Heritage. We look at the state level scores that are done by Jason Sorens and other people. So we have numerous different ways to take a look at the size of government. It's not just that. But what I want to just say is, if this were any other topic of public policy, if this were drugs, if this were private property issues, if this were the ownership of guns, if this were anything else, the answer to this from a libertarian perspective would be super obvious. Every argument that Dave has made against immigration is also an argument against people having children. They don't assimilate, they're not next taxpayers, and man, they're going to mess up our culture. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move to the Q&A a bit later, exercise moderate a couple of questions. Where of the Fraser and the criteria have to do?
That's correct. We looked at all these different measurements.
Correctly to say, Alex, that you took those into account and that Dave is making a factual mistake in thinking that you only took government as a share of GDP. Is that correct?
That's correct. We looked at all these different measurements separately and numerous different analyses, including the book that I mentioned with Benjamin Powell and lots of other papers. We also looked at public opinion. We looked at numerous on public policy issues. So we looked at all of these different measures, yes.
Any comment from you, Dave?
Well, I didn't say that was the only measure. I said I've seen Alex use this measure before. But so are you telling me that the government we have today is substantially smaller than the government in 1960?
No, my claim was that it has grown a lot more slowly since then. So the period of time when it grew the fastest was from about 1930 to the late 60s, and then it slowed down. And my theory for why immigration causes that is that immigration kills labor unions. and labor unions are the most successful progressive organization that lobbies and pushes for big government.
Oh, Dave, I just want to challenge you then. I'm familiar with the Economic Freedom Index of the Fraser Institute, Cato, and it was increasing from 1970 to 2000. It's still at highs. So if he did use a broad-based economic freedom index, and if it does tend to correlate over the last 50 years with the increase in immigration, would you agree then that there is some connection, that it's not just government? Would you agree with that, or do you still challenge it?
Wait, agree that there's a connection what? Between...
By the way, Rishabh, did you hear the argument? It was pretty nice, no? What do you have to say to it? Because illegal immigration or legal immigration kills or destroys unions. Not necessarily all the time, probably. At least illegal immigration does. I don't see how legal immigration kills unions, but illegal immigrations definitely do harm unions, which is why local small businesses or bigger businesses with local entities and stuff will definitely love illegal immigration. They do, which is why all Bangladeshis are never going to get kicked out. Ninar was asking, but what about preventing all of them from coming here? Yeah, a sniper on every tree on the Bangladesh border. That's the only way to prevent. Otherwise, because there are so many other pull factors from inside the country that they are going to still risk their lives and try to come here for opportunities. Now, and there, I don't see the government who takes donations, obviously, from businessmen completely preventing illegal immigration, because those businesses do benefit from illegal immigration.
Immigration
a coincidence, at least. Economic Freedom Index, broadly defined, including all 5 criteria, only one of which is government, increased from 1970 to 2000, and is now sort of plateaued. So economic freedom generally has increased. Deregulation of various industries, all of that stuff. Would you concede then that there's some coincidence? You're not granting correlation, but definitely a coincidence.
No, I mean, I don't think I would. I think that it's sometimes, really smart people and really good scientists can overestimate how much science can really understand, and it's very difficult to measure how free exactly you think a society is.
Okay.
The size and scope of government has gotten dramatically bigger in that time period. If Alex wants to argue that it wasn't quite as rapid, I would probably, maybe he's right about that. I mean, obviously World War II has got to be the biggest, most dramatic expansion of, the pure power of the U.S. government. But no, that really none of that's the point anyway.
But you don't see deregulation of airlines, deregulation of trucking, deregulation of finance, a lot of movement toward economic freedom that occurred over this period that had nothing to do with government. Do you see?
Yes, I agree with you. Those things occurred over that period.
Okay,
sure.
just a coincidence. Not important, sorry to belabor it. Alex, Milton Friedman has famously said, you can have a welfare state or you can have free immigration, but you can't have both. What do you say to that statement?
So the next line in that quote by Friedman is always forgotten. That's why Friedman supports illegal immigration, because they don't have access to the welfare state. And I think what we need to take a look at here is Friedman is making an empirical claim.
These are first world problems. ये तो इंडिया पे अप्लाई नहीं होता है. यहाँ पे तो illegal immigrant के पास 10 मिनट चाहिए होंगे फेक आधार कार्ड बनाने के लिए. वो तो एक और प्रॉब्लम है. क्या अजीब सिचुएशन है इंडिया का.
That immigrants use a ton of welfare, that more people are going to come. As a result of this, it's going to bankrupt the country and fleece the taxpayers. And that may have been true when Friedman said that. The evidence is it's absolutely not true now. And even if it is easier to build a higher wall around welfare than it is to build one around the country, and certainly more libertarian. Welfare is already pretty severely restricted in this country. It should be more restricted. I mean, I'd get rid of the entire welfare state if I could. But it already is fairly restricted. It should be more restricted. And that is something that we can build on. And I think certainly consistent, or at least partly consistent with libertarianism.
So I'm sorry. So you're not making the claim that I thought Brian Kaplan made. You're not claiming that even if we just did nothing, immigrants get less welfare. We would still have a pretty neutral fiscal effect from immigration. That the claims that immigrants are costly are invalid. Are you making that even if we did nothing?
Yes.
You are making that claim.
Yeah, I'm making that claim right now. So one of the big costs of people is public education. Enormously expensive. Average of about $20,000 per student per year. Now what happens when a 20-year-old moves here? We don't pay for any of their education, but they start working immediately. That is one of the big secrets in a lot of these fiscal welfare studies about how immigrants come in and how they're net taxpayers, is that somebody comes at the age of 20, even if they don't have much education, right? They start working, they're paying. Meanwhile, somebody like me, I went to school in Southern California. I cost that state like $200,000. I'm like $200,000 in the hole when I start working. It's gonna take me a lot of years to build up. I'm never paying California back. Forget them. But but it's, immigrants come in right away and they're just like that. If we get basically a freebie.
So
Now, conflating illegal immigration and legal immigration for the entire debate is going to be the opposite of fruitful. But this is, of course, true. The universities of USA definitely benefit from this kind of immigration. The students are the ones who work in all those cafeterias, etc. They don't have to hire too many people or pay them American citizen wages, etc. Because it's the immigrant students who are poorer off or need some pocket money, and it's a happy arrangement that everyone goes on with. There's no, I think, official documentation on this. So people will have to, the immigrant students will have to work there, and the people in those, running those cafeterias or food stalls inside the university can happily employ them and get away with paying lesser wages.
Dave,
I mean, the government gets a freebie.
Well, taxpayers get more workers in a larger economy, more friends,
but
more
you were talking about
entrepreneurs,
paying
but, yeah.
taxes. Okay, the government gets more money.
well-
what libertarians love, more taxes being
Well,
paid.
it's better than taxpayers getting fleeced by immigrants who take more. Certainly, it's better that way than that, right?
Yeah, Dave, I was going to ask you then. I thought that you were concerned with respect to, obviously, taxpayers pay for the education of immigrant children. So you don't like taxpayers being fleeced. It seems as though we're having difficulty this evening because we're going to get way into the numerical weeds. Alex is making the claim that immigrants are, with respect to the fiscal cost, including everything, including schooling, approximately neutral, that they are not costly. I believe you may. Do you doubt that? Do you regard it as irrelevant, or do you think that the opposite is the case? Are they costly to the taxpayer?
I doubt that. It's also irrelevant to my argument. But from what I've seen of studies that Alex has co-published himself, that oftentimes this will be over a 30-year horizon where we'll say then eventually the immigrants start paying it back.
Yeah.
But the question, this is more fundamental, and you kind of can just think about this as a person and don't even have to worry about that. The question is, look, if somebody who, forget the way we use welfare, let's think of welfare the way libertarians think of welfare. Is everything the government does, essentially. So if you're saying there's an immigrant if there is an immigrant family who comes here uninvited, and they come into the country, immediately they have access to the roads, the fire departments, the police, the emergency room, the public schools, all types of things that the taxpayer is on the hook for. Now, if Alex wants to argue, and he has demonstrated in some of his studies, that those costs will be offset by later, those immigrants working, and then the second and third generation, fine, but it's the taxpayer ought to have some choice in whether they feel like laying out that money or not. And I don't think that the libertarian answer is to say that, like, if you're forced to essentially give a loan to someone but you get the money back, therefore that's libertarian. By the way, the point I was making before is that this is the nature of government, right? They screw you coming and going. It doesn't matter. If people are getting welfare services, then yeah, the taxpayer was forced to fund that. And if they end up paying more taxes, they're just giving this criminal organization that robs me and you more money.
one of the
It's unfortunate, but that's the reality of the state.
One of the best observations by Ludwig von Mises in his theory of interventionism was that one government regulation or law causes other problems that then require other regulations to fix, and this sort of never-ending cycle until you get total government control over society. So what we have here is Dave saying there are some problems caused by public schools, by welfare, and these other things. And the solution is even more government control over the movement of people across borders. I think he's falling into this trap that Ludwig von Mises identified as being one that leads increasingly toward more state and government control over the economy. And I think the duty, the goal, the point of libertarians is to push back against the state control, not to try to make little compromises here and there and try to play the political economy game as if there's more than like 50 of us in the entire world and we can control political outcomes. Is to try to think through what kind of system, what kind of rules maximize individual liberty.
What kind of complacency is this? I have always noticed this is one major problem with libertarians. They are happy with their anonymous accounts, cool, edgy DPs, and being considered a part of this hypothetical 50 people. They are happy with their exclusive group and their exclusive consumption patterns. They are happy being relegated to just a Facebook group. And some libertarians of India now want the Libertarian Party of India to go back to being discussed in just a Facebook group, as opposed to how they were being discussed up until a few days back on Twitter and my channel.
Maximize our freedom and maximize our prosperity.
Can I ask Alex a question?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Like a hypothetical question. Let's say there's a government, could be a foreign country. Let's say it's in Sweden. Yeah. The government is doing something me and you would both agree it shouldn't be doing. Yeah. And let's say you're there and you convince them all with your superior arguments. You know, the government has a factory and it's producing shoes. And Alex, you convince them that this should be privatized. Like, the government doesn't need to be in the business of making shoes. The market will do it much better. This factory should be privatized. And there were two proposals for privatization that were on the table. And so proposal A was, I don't know, something like, we're going to privatize this company and all of the taxpayers will get like a share in it, or the people who homesteaded it will get a share in it, or something like that. And then proposal B was, we're going to privatize this company and it will 100% be owned by a Chinese firm. That had nothing to do with paying the taxes, nothing to do with building it, none of that. Is one of those proposals preferable to the other?
Depends whatever gets the maximum price. Whatever you sell the asset for at the highest price, which will partly, hopefully, compensate the poor Swedish taxpayer who's had to suffer, at least for a tax rebate for the crappy government shoes they've had to wear for so long.
Wait, but hold on, Alex. I just want to be clear on this.
So whatever maximizes the price.
Hold on. So I want to be clear on this, okay? So if the taxpayers are forced to build something, you do not think that they have any better claim on that? Like, in those two scenarios, everyone in this room cannot say that there isn't one that's clearly preferable, which is that the taxpayers who have been forced to build and fund the maintenance of this thing get it, rather than some Chinese company who had absolutely nothing to do with it. They just get it. It just seems to me, Alex, like the answer is so obvious, but you just don't like the implication of what that answer would be.
I'm thinking like an economist who believes in getting maximum price for the assets that you sell. Obviously, I think the Swedish government should get the maximum price it can for the assets it sells and use that to do a rebate on the taxpayers of Sweden, rather than trying to give it up.
Okay, but that second part, kind of sneaks out.
Like centrally planned scheme.
Okay.
We see countries around the world try to privatize state-owned assets through the schemes that you justify, and it doesn't work. It didn't work.
Hold on. But it would
There's a lot of other things going on here.
Alex, but it would go as a rebate back to the taxpayer. So, like, if I were to steal money from you and buy a house, and then I'm out of money, it's rightful that it should go to you. It should just go to whoever I can get the most money for. But you see, he snuck in there on the condition that I'm giving the money back to you afterward. So that's kind of okay, why? Why should the money go back to the taxpayers?
Because they own it. Because they got
fleeced.
Do they? Because they got fleeced.
Oh, that's interesting that you said that, Alex. You heard it here. That's all I needed,
Let's
because
think
they
about-
own
let's-
it.
let's
That's
think
right, Alex. They sure do.
Yeah. And let's see how they vote with their dollars, ladies and gentlemen. Not through their politicians once every 5 or 6 years, but through their tax dollars. What do? They buy goods and services from immigrants. Nobody believes this story about government ownership of property and them trying to behave like private owners.
Nobody believes this.
This is finally a good debate. This is what we like, don't we? The seesaw of ideas. This was so beautiful. हमारा, our ownership etc. पे उतर आया libertarian, anarcho-capitalist. अरे मेरा GPU. चलो कमेंट पढ़ते रहते हैं जब तक ये बफर हो.
Yeah. And let's see how they vote with their dollars, ladies and gentlemen. Not through their politicians once every 5 or 6 years, but through their tax dollars. What do? They buy goods and services from immigrants.
Right.
Nobody believes this story about government ownership of property and them trying to behave like private owners.
Nobody believes this story.
What's up?
You just agreed with the story. It's your words. They own it. Listen, the idea that if there's a
They own the tax dollars that was taken from them that should be given back to them. That was taken from them. They're
Yes,
owed the
exactly.
money back from them.
Exactly. Okay.
How do Americans vote with their dollars, ladies and gentlemen? Do they vote for closed borders or do they buy things from immigrants every day?
Well,
Their dollar,
listen,
the way they vote with their dollars matters a lot more than how they vote in a polling booth every couple years.
so the truth is that the American people really, really agree with Alex's immigration
I
policy.
say we should let the
even
market
though-
decide.
Yeah.
Let's let the market decide.
I agree. I'd have no problem
I'm
letting the
not a
market
socialist.
decide.
I don't want the government to decide these things. Let the market
Yes,
decide.
there's
Let
nothing.
people vote with their dollars.
The pure market decision was the UN and NGOs funding caravans by
No.
the hundreds of thousands
No,
coming over
I
the southern
oppose-
border.
I oppose.
The pure free market, ladies and gentlemen.
So
I mean,
look,
come
Dave,
on.
Genius counter argument by Dave here. He's being sarcastic, of course. That okay then, who is supporting illegal immigration? Is it the market, bro? Huh? Why is UN supporting illegal immigration then? Of course, अब market तो करेगा ही. Market ने पैसा दिया है. Koch brothers ने पैसा दिया है UN को. For the people who don't know, Bernie Sanders used to say this long before his brain was hijacked by cultural Marxists. He used to say that no, I'm not in favor of illegal immigration because it used to be a Koch brothers policy. Koch brothers realized अरे हम डायरेक्टली काहे लड़ रहे हैं, इनको हायर करते हैं, उनसे कुछ कल्चर वल्चर का चक्कर लगा के मल्टीकल्चरलिज्म बोल के उनसे बुलवाते हैं. भाई ब्राह्मण भोजन करो, बुलवाओ, हम काहे फंसते हैं इन चीज़ों में. एंड देन बर्नी सैंडर्स यूज्ड टू आल्सो से दैट Israel absolutely has a right to exist, etc. पता नहीं आज क्या बोलेंगे.
It's
Guys,
like, what-
Dave is trying to have it both ways. He's trying to say immigration is a government program. It only exists because of the government. But we can't liberalize immigration because then too many people will come. Which is it?
that's
Which
not
is it?
having it both ways. The point is that I'm saying it's a government program.
It's
whether
not
you-
a government program any more than free trade is.
That's not true. And here's the crucial difference.
not
okay?
any more
Hold on
than
one
that.
second, Alex. Here's the crucial difference between free trade. And it does seem, I don't know if you guys are picking up on this so far, but I was kind of interested in how Alex was going to grapple with the arguments I'm presenting, and it's turning out he's just not going to.
Yeah.
But here's the major difference between free trade and immigration, right?
That's true so far. He has not touched one single argument from Dave Smith and countered him head on. He's going on with his own stories. He's still in his opening statement phase, it seems. He's not engaging in the debate really.
When you have free trade, it's a voluntary interaction. A business purchases something from a foreign country. That is a voluntary interaction. When hundreds of thousands of people come into this country against the will of the domestic population, when nobody invited
The
them
will
here,
of the people.
Yes,
Come on,
Alex.
man. No, they buy.
Yes, human
We
beings
want
have
to
wills.
buy them.
Individuals have wills. When they get together, there is
Yes.
a group of individuals.
The government
Yes.
has a will. Yeah, okay, comrade.
No, I
listen.
didn't.
Well,
No, but
No, listen.
But see, no.
Everybody
Hold on.
wants
No, I'm
to
sorry.
buy.
That's a
Immigrants
bullshit.
want to sell
That's
their
a-
labor. Americans want
Listen.
to buy their labor. We want to buy
The
and sell.
government.
It's voluntary.
By the way,
It's
Alex, here's the
voluntary.
funny thing: the government does have a will, and the people have a will. I've been talking about the will of the people. The will of the government has been very close to Alex's
No,
policy.
it
Yes.
isn't. It
If
has
you
been
want to be honest about it.
95% closed borders. Ladies and gentlemen, I appeal to you to something called facts. They are the diagram in your table of what the Soviet-style immigration system actually looks like. If you think this is anything close to open borders, my God, I've got multiple bridges in this city to sell.
I want to jump in. I want to jump in and ask you a
So
question.
ridiculous.
Okay, Alex. Dave challenged. Dave challenged one point about the apparent what his view was of the apparent inconsistency between your idea that you want an Ellis Island type system versus open borders. Are you are saying, if I understand you correctly, that all illegals would be told if you report to a checkpoint, you have a general amnesty, report to a checkpoint, and submit to the government's query about your state of health, your mental health, your criminal background, submit to all of that, and then you can qualify to be a citizen. First of all, I take it anybody who doesn't respond to that, you would join Dave in evicting them.
I think it is the government's responsibility to prove that an individual shouldn't be here, and if they are a violent and property criminal, if they're spreading a disease, if they're a terrorist or something like that, they should treat them like they do every criminal or somebody who should be in jail or somebody who should be quarantined for making everybody sick.
You would evict them as well.
Yes, absolutely. All these people who don't, who are criminals, who violate other people's rights, yes.
Comment from you, Dave, about that
So
specifically.
do you support an Ellis Island style system to get into the country?
It'd be a vast improvement over what we have now. So yeah, it's a vast improvement. If that was the vote,
Okay, but if
then,
that,
yeah.
but so what's not an improvement? What do you support?
So I think that if you, it should be on the government to prove for each individual who wants to come to the United States that they're not allowed, with the goal of keeping out violent and property offenders or people who spread serious contagious diseases, national security threats, terrorists, and situations like that. People like that.
Yeah, but that's not the question. I'm not saying who should be kept out. I'm saying what system do you support? An Ellis Island style system? You said that would be preferable, but what would be even preferable to that?
Well, I just laid out, like if you want to come through an airport to the United States and the government says, you know, we think you're a criminal, we can prove it, and if they can prove it through due process, then they should be able to exclude you.
And when you say, okay, so if there
Sort of the same legal thing that we would.
Now, prevention of crime. Have you all seen Minority Report, guys? Preemptive strikes, prevention और वो जो अरेस्ट होता है ना, क्या बोलते हैं उसको, एंटिसिपेटरी बेल, या फिर मतलब कुछ होने के से पहले ही अरेस्ट कर लेते हैं, जैसे सावरकर को किया था, लियाकत अली खान आए थे इसलिए. That kind of thing is slippery slope on both sides. On one side, you can't really wait for someone to commit a crime and then consider him a criminal, or let's say someone has not committed a crime, or the US government at that point, in terms of that particular illegal immigrant, or even someone seeking legal immigration at that situation, in that hypothetical situation in the airport, let's say US government can't actually prove that he's a criminal. They're going to have to wait for that person to commit a crime and harm an American citizen, and then consider him a criminal, which is a bit problematic when some lives probably can be saved by the US government simply en masse, in bulk, considering a group of people potential criminals, etc. That has racism written all over it, of course, bigotry, etc. But I guess what can we do after a point? On the other hand, if we do preventive measures like these, then it can be applied to a lot of other stuff for citizens as well. Why wait for anyone else to find out? Let's consider some groups even inside the country on that same logic, on those same lines, that why wait for them to harm someone? Let's just imagine that this particular group of people are potential criminals, and fuck them anyway. Let's see some comments. The next question should be to Alex: is America a nation state, or should America be a nation state? What's stopping Pakistan and Bangladesh to use Rohingyas as biological weapons against India? Such a weak argument. If you want to go to the US and work there without a visa, that's also a crime, so Trump is right in deporting them. Urging for future crimes, yeah. Sanctuary cities have that system, and Right wingers are sending people for to sanctuary cities, and then sanctuary city mayors are saying, no, we don't want them here. The New York mayor has already said it, who is a Democrat or used to be. New York mayor or Rhode Island mayor. Then California governor filed an FIR against Ron DeSantis for sending people in buses to California. Kidnapping charge लगा दिया Ron DeSantis पे.
And if they can prove it through due process, then they should be able to exclude you.
And when you say, okay, so if there
Sort of the same.
Now, retrovising Alex Nowrasteh is a leftist. He is not, but you see, someone else was pointing out that Reason think tank is also funded by Coke, which is why Brahman Bhojan हर side पे करेगा Coke. उनको तो चाहिए रिजल्ट्स, तो जो जहाँ पे जिस भी एक्सक्यूजेस से ओपन बॉर्डर सपोर्ट करेंगे उनको ही पैसे देंगे. कल्चरल मल्टीकल्चरलिज्म वाले लेफ्टिस्ट एकेडमिक्स को भी और एनार्को कैपिटलिज्म वाले राइट विंगर्स को भी.
Same legal thing that we would apply to anybody else, like to you and I, if we were like out of jail and wanted for a crime or something.
Okay. All right.
One final question, which I want to lob at Dave and then have Alex respond. Dave, let's say that it's 1910. Where we sit.
You just turned 30. I love him. He's my mentor. Love this guy so much.
Love him back. Love him back. Love him back. And
And Dave said he wasn't going to piss off a Jew tonight.
For those of you guys watching, if you rewind the tape, I said I wasn't going to piss off the Jews tonight.
Dave.
There's two over here, buddy.
I love Dave. He didn't piss me off. And I turned 80 and doing something. This is the best job you could possibly have if you're 80 years old. Doesn't take up all your time, but it gives you something to do in the morning. I love it. And I love you guys being here. I love Dave being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Gene.
We love you, Gene. It's 1910. Hold on, I'm back in my
Okay. Yes. Now, I'm going to play. Just briefly, of course, the emotional card is that all four of my grandparents went to Ellis Island, and they submitted to all that bullshit. They had to prove this, they had to prove that. And by the way, the German Jews who lived uptown didn't want them to set foot in this country. All the evidence, the Italians were streaming in. Some of them, as we know from Godfather 2, were bringing mafia. The population just didn't want my grubby ancestors. I don't know if they were your grubby ancestors as well, from coming in. And they had to submit pretty much to what Alex is saying. Now, I'm happy that they did, personally, but that's irrelevant. The only question really is this. In 1910, would you have taken the same position about these immigrants moving in, sending the kids to school, that you do now? Or is it because you take a different position because there was less welfare?
Well, I mean, okay, so I essentially think, as I was saying, that the way libertarians ought to think about this is that the people of the country ought to have some say in this. And that's not to say that, this isn't what, I'm not saying the will of the government or that the government perfectly, expresses the will of the people. I'm just saying that once the government has taken from the people and created this public property, then yeah, that should be more of a factor than say what the will of some destitute person. Now, in this example, listen, it's kind of almost like asking from a libertarian position to me, look, if there were if some homeless people showed up at my house tonight and were like, hey, we want to stay here. Can we stay in your house? You got some extra room. It's like the decision ought to be mine because it's my house, and I can judge that against what. Now, if the story was that that homeless guy was like my grandfather or your grandfather, I might be very happy if they were taken in.
but
And
I'm
I think at points in American history, it worked pretty well, probably better than almost any country ever, at bringing people in and assimilating them. Now, if you're asking me, do I think the fact that in 1910 there was no welfare state and no central bank and no income tax and no regulatory state, and no culture of kind of, there was a culture of you're either going to work hard and make it or you're going to have to go home. We don't have that same culture here today. And there was also a culture of like embracing, at least to some degree, that capitalism and kind of rugged individual mindset. And so I think, yeah, it's probably not going to work as well in large numbers today as it did back then.
To go with that analogy real quick, if I may, the homeless person comes to your house, asks for a room at your property. The proper analogy is you say yes, and the government comes in and says, no, you can't. This is all, I think, the point that Dave is not looking at is the voluntary interaction that is the basis of this.
What the
Americans.
What a bad, stupid argument. How is that the analogy? So he's saying that since American citizens buy so much from immigrants or from other countries, that means they would be happy to live with them as well. Just because you do business with someone, you want them to be your neighbor or fill up your entire country. That is not the case. That does not happen. Can't criminals be good employees in a sweatshop? What kind of an assumption is that? What the fuck is that? This is the weirdest argument I've heard so far.
And so I think, yeah, it's probably not going to work as well in large numbers today as it did back then.
To go with that analogy real quick, if I may, the homeless person comes to your house, asks for a room at your property. The proper analogy is you say yes, and the government comes in and says, no, you can't. This is all, I think, the point that Dave is not looking at is the voluntary interaction that is the basis of this. Americans want to hire immigrants. They want to rent to them. They want to sell to them. They want to buy from them. They want to marry them, and all this stuff. There's a voluntary interaction at the core of this that is present in all these situations. And
As if scale doesn't matter. The degree of how many people we're talking about on an individual level, then the individual libertarian's own rights and all sorts of voluntary bazi gets trampled when we are going to be dealing with bulk, like the example Dave gave in the beginning. If 500 million people from another country right now get to US, how is that voluntary interaction going to happen between 500 million other people and 330 million Americans? What in the fuck?
in that analogy used, it's the government coming in saying, giving their answer for you about how you use your property and interact with people.
All right, can I just, let me respond, because I do think this might be like right at the heart of the entire debate. This is, for Alex to say that, look, this is a voluntary interaction that the government is just getting in the middle of. You know, like the people want these immigrants in, and then the government's telling you, no, they can't. I'm not saying that that's never true in any instance. I mean, there certainly are instances where someone in America has a cousin in Italy and wants to invite him over here, and they got to go through that whole thing that Alex just showed you. And yeah, libertarians should be against that. But man, is Alex missing the forest for the trees if he thinks that's the description of immigration in present-day America. What the American people actually wanted in terms of the popular vote was Donald Trump back in the White House, because that's how much Biden's immigration policy pissed them. Hold on one second. Let me just finish, and then please respond. The issue is that when you have a situation like we've had over the last few years, where millions of people are pouring into the country uninvited, that the American people did not ask to be here, the scenario is not, I'm trying to have my friend into my house and the government's stopping me. The scenario that we've all been living through is the American people are screaming at the top of their lungs, we don't want this. We do not wish to have this level of immigration, and the government is saying, screw you, you're taking it anyway.
Yeah.
And the fact that after some people have gotten in here uninvited, that some people trade with them, that does not prove that they were invited, that it's a voluntary reaction. The American people are screaming at the top of their lungs.
Yeah.
This is not voluntary.
David,
Wait, Gene.
I just wanted to make the point that your answer to my 1910 question was good. I just want to add, as you probably know, not only did the Gentiles object to us Jews coming in, the German Jews didn't want us. If there was a vote, we were not welcome in 1910. Immigrants, generally speaking, they're strange, they're grungy. Generally speaking,
They made some good points.
Okay,
not
but
welcome. Okay,
listen.
But that aside.
Guys, the American voters were furious, and rightly so, at the chaos along the border. Why were those people coming illegally? Because of the border socialism and control over this. Why are people selling drugs on the street? Because drugs are illegal. Yeah, people are mad at that. The solution is to legalize drugs. The solution is to legalize immigration. It is not the duty of libertarians to come in and go, you know what? That socialist government-controlled system that the people really want, yeah, that's great. No, our duty is to come in and say these problems, which are real problems. These are real problems with illegal immigration and border chaos, but they are caused by the government. And the solution here, as in almost every single area in our lives, is getting the government out of the way.
Okay, just a moment. I want to now give it over to audience questions.
You can clap.
Ms. Scranton, the microphone is over there, and I recognize.
What an insanely bad argument once again. I can't believe this. The problem of illegal immigration is not what is going on at the border, the altercations between ICE and Mexicans. That is not the core problem that Americans are talking about. They're talking about what happens when they start living in the country. How is that happening? Because of the policy of having a border in the first place. If there was no border, they come here anyway, randomly, casually, without the altercations with ICE. And then after that, those potential criminals don't do a crime. Or even the non-criminals don't change the way of life for Americans. How is the government creating the problem by having a border in the first place? What a weird argument here. But still the Americans don't want those number of... Yeah, exactly.
I will recognize people up at the balcony. So please ask your question. Ask a question. No need to identify yourself. Lay it on us. What's your question?
So I want to refocus the debate on the fact that it's focusing on the American present moment. So Alex, considering the debate focuses and centers the argument on present-day America, where in places like Aurora, Colorado, and parts of Ohio, immigrants are negatively impacting American communities, and where the state still compels taxpayers to fund expansive welfare systems and programs that support immigrants, and where Americans, as Dave mentioned, voted overwhelmingly for this restriction on immigration after, some would argue, after seeing European communities decimated by open border immigration. How does that impact your argument that you're making? Can you please frame it into this current moment that we're living in as Americans? Thank you.
Nope.
Could you clarify your question?
Just anchor your arguments in the current moment we're living in America as the debate resolution states. So currently in America, Americans are anti-immigration after seeing Europe decimated with open border immigration. Places like Aurora, Colorado, where these hotels were taken over, are negatively impacting the American experience.
Okay, I think I get it now.
Just anchor it in the current moment.
Yeah,
Thank
so all of the problems you described are caused by state intervention and state regulations in other areas of the economy. The government funding welfare systems, the government funding public schools, the government in Europe, for instance, which makes it illegal for large numbers of migrants to even get a job if they want to, forces them on the welfare. Listen, Europe has a bunch of problems. To pretend that Europe...
I can't stick to English now. Oh my god. That a key argument. What the fuck is this argument? Are anarcho-capitalists this dumb on Europe? So if if only there was legal immigration, if only they got a job from Mirpur after coming to England, then all would be well. Then no grooming gangs would exist. रहो Facebook के group में गांडुओ.
Has open borders, they have a system similar to this. The problem, of course, is large amounts of illegal immigration and a lot of those migrants not being allowed to work, being forced to be on welfare. Yeah, there's lots of problems in other places, right? We're focusing on present-day America, but most of those problems, vast majority of them, are caused by other government interventions in the economy. And if this were any other public policy issue we were talking about, Dave and I would agree that that is the issue. The issue is the government policies and restrictions on our liberty, not the people necessarily who take advantage of it.
Coming from you, Jay.
I think, listen, I think this is a problem that some guys at Cato and libertarians in general, libertarians I love, have a problem of doing, is that sometimes we almost want to impose the way we would like it to be onto the world. This is not Alex, by the way. I'm making fun of other people at Cato here. But this is my favorite thing that I've ever seen from Cato. This was a study in 2021, and they did a write-up of it. What they found is that, and this was really good numbers, they were celebrating how high the numbers were. 23% of Americans wanted a high level of immigration. 68% of Americans wanted a low level of immigration. 9% of Americans wanted no immigration. Cato wrote this up and said, only 9% of Americans want zero immigration, 91% welcome immigration. Do you see how you could sometimes put, listen, I understand what Alex is saying. We would have large areas of agreement about how much government interventions create other problems that then beget other government interventions. That's true.
Right.
If you think the only reason why people were like upset at the Biden immigration was the chaos at the border, as your guy.
Yeah, and the knock-on
hold on, but let me just say this.
My argument.
As your guy said, since 1965, for most of the years, it's been single digits of Americans who supported high levels of immigration. The truth is that the American people don't want these people here. And the problem is that if you're not willing to grapple with that kind of uncomfortable reality, you're going to get it all. You could run me all the regressions you want to about how immigrants expand the economy, they contribute more to the economy. Therefore, if we have Alex's immigration policy, which will probably lead to what, 5, 10, 20 million immigrants coming here next year, we're going to get this big explosion in GDP. Let me tell you what we're going to get. We're going to get Pinochet elected president. That's what you're going to get if you have immigration.
I sure wish you appealed to libertarian
Nice. Genius.
principles as much as you appeal to public opinion.
I actually am.
Okay.
No, you're actually not.
appealing
All
to
you're
both.
doing is democratic fundamentalism. What does the median voter want? What does this poll say? What does this survey say?
Well, Alex,
this
it's
debate
true.
is about libertarianism
Yes.
and libertarian principles. I wish you would stick to that rather than making these arguments about, oh, gee, I wonder what the moderate Republican wants. We
Hold
got
on,
to do what
Alex,
that guy wants.
Alex,
Libertarianism for whom, Alex? For whom is the libertarianism that you want to discuss? Is it for somebody in particular? Or for an abstract group of people, just entire humanity and stuff? पूरा वासुदैव कुटुंबकम कर दिया.
I'm sorry. Hold on.
Who cares?
Okay. Fine. You can say that.
From his demeanor, I can tell he's happy with being the edgy bro in Facebook groups.
You can say, who cares? Listen, I do think in my opening, I was making an appeal to libertarian principles. If you don't agree with them, that's fine. Let me tell you this. When you say, who cares, you're making empirical claims about what's going to happen if we have higher levels of immigration. When you say this appeal to democracy, it's called, something libertarians don't like that much, living in reality. That's what we live in. We live in a country that has votes. We have a presidential election every 4 years. What was the result of record high numbers of people coming into this country illegally? The result was Donald Trump winning every swing state and the popular vote. You guys want to deal with reality a little bit? What do you think it would be if we took the numbers that came in under Joe Biden and multiplied them by 5 or 10? What do you think this country is going to look like? And is that just me making an appeal to what the average voter thinks? I'm making an appeal to what type of country our children are going to grow up.
And Dave has the gall to call me a beltway libertarian? He calls me a Beltway libertarian and Cato. That is the most in the swamp argument
now,
that I've
I'm not
ever
here- no,
heard from a libertarian. My
okay.
God, man. Where are your principles?
Somebody in the cheap seats. You got a question?
That's a derogatory term.
Please. What's your
I'm
question?
sorry,
sir?
seating challenged individual.
Yeah,
What's your
seating
question, sir?
challenged, seating challenged.
Ask your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. It's been wonderful, great styles. Coming to a libertarian debate, you guys are talking a lot from the government perspective. I'm just really surprised because at the individual perspective, from individual liberty, looking from the immigrant's perspective, right? What have they done wrong? You understand when you're talking about immigration, you're prohibiting them from entering public spaces, from interacting in local market. Talking from the immigrant's perspective, right? What have they done wrong? You understand? When you're talking about immigration, you're prohibiting them from entering public spaces, from interacting in local marketplaces. Those are normally rights that we really protect as libertarians. So I'm just a little confused as to what their crime is and why they've met the high bar of prohibiting them from that fundamental liberty.
The crime of it sounds like it's a question just you, Dave.
I got the
Take
question.
it, Dave.
Well, I mean, I'm certainly not claiming that the immigrants have done anything wrong. You know, I'm not saying they're bad people any more than I would be saying that if 5 homeless people knocked on my door and were like, "Hey, can we stay the night?" Like, it's not that they're bad people. It's just I got a wife and 2 kids in here, and like that's my. It's not. I'm not a bad person for being like, "No, I'm sorry, you can't come in. This is for my family." And the question of like restricting liberty, it's like, look, there is a legitimate restriction of liberty if somebody is invited to the United States of America and they're not leeching off of the taxpayer and they're invited by a host and the government says no, you can't come. No question, that's a violation of liberty. But I'm sorry, where exactly is the natural right to enter property uninvited that you do not own?
That's not what we're talking about.
That is what
We're talking about
No, it's not
private
what you're talking about.
property.
It's reality.
We're talking about private property. I'm saying you should be able to invite anybody on your property from anywhere in the world without asking for permission from the state. Dave is saying you got to ask permission from Dear Leader.
No.
Come on.
No. Hold on.
This
But
is the easiest thing in the
Alex,
world.
well, it is if you completely misunderstand what I'm saying. I agree with you. You should be able to invite anybody you want onto your property.
So he agrees.
Yeah, you'll get it. Don't worry, hang in there.
Yeah.
I agree with that. But that's not what characterizes the overwhelming majority of the people who have
Yes, it is.
It's not what characterizes the overwhelming majority of the people who have come into this country, specifically over the last few years. What you've had is waves of people uninvited.
That's Dave did not give the best possible argument here. Again, he's appealing to other stuff that this guy doesn't want to accept. The bigger question here is just like one individual might have a moral right, libertarianism wise speaking, to invite anybody he wants without asking permission from the government. The same way, the other guy has a right to not live with someone he doesn't want to. Uska right ka kya hoga? So therefore, I think the best middle of the road solution, and I'm not saying this as simply for being flippant or being edgy. Anyone who personally wishes or is okay with illegal immigrants coming into the country, their homes must be opened up, and then they can get tax breaks or something, or if they benefit out of it, they can be in fact taxed more for some reason. But let individual people have illegal Bangladeshis and Pakistanis in their homes, or even in USA, and they can have libertarian guns, of course, in their homes. But that way, everyone benefits. Don't we? Because let's say hypothetically that individual Bangladeshi who is not a criminal comes here, lives with a random Indian family or American family, and goes about his way. That homeowner, that host gets to keep a cut money from whatever job he gets in the country. If he commits a crime, gets arrested. Okay, and the others who don't want to live anywhere near an illegal Bangladeshi, they get their own neighborhood. Some neighborhoods do have that they'll enter your homes directly, and some neighborhoods won't. Maybe that can be a solution.
by the millions. That's what's been going on, and that's what the American people are objecting to. And so, you know, I know Alex likes to say they're all nativists or something like that, but like, I think I would recommend you listen to some of these people. There are very specific grievances that they have. Towns that have been completely transformed, where people are living there for 4 generations. 4 generations they've been paying property taxes, and all of a sudden the local public school is majority not speaking English. It's made up by students that have come from this incredibly brutal journey where many of them have been abused. Now, again, to your point, this doesn't mean I think those kids are bad kids. I don't think the kids who made this horrible journey, who have been abused, are bad kids. But also, I don't really think I would want my kids going to school with a bunch of traumatized kids who don't speak English.
He doesn't think they're bad. He doesn't think they're bad, but he wants the state to use its power to let the state use its power to push them out.
You boo for that. You boo for me not wanting my children to be at school with
traumatized kids.
traumatized
You want the government to go after them with guns and deport them and take away their property and shove them out of this country.
No, that's not what they booed for.
Yeah, that earns a boo at a libertarian event.
They booed for me saying that I don't want my 6- and 3-year-old kids to be going to school with traumatized kids who don't speak the language. And they booed for that.
Great argument for school choice.
Yes, we all agree on that, Alex. Yes, no kidding.
It's not an argument for closed borders. It's an argument for school choice.
It's you know, actually, it's an argument for both.
No, it's not. It's not.
Next question.
You guys spent the debate discussing what the federal government should and shouldn't do, but nobody brought up whether the federal government is actually authorized to do it. Now, Lysander Spooner notwithstanding, the Constitution is the law of the land. Do the two of you believe that the Constitution authorizes the federal government to place restrictions on immigration when it comes to peaceful people? And if you do, where in the Constitution is this authorization granted?
Sounds like a challenge for you, Dave.
It's for both.
Well, sounds like...
I mean, you know, I'm not really a constitutionalist or any type of expert on it. I mean, I don't. I'm arguing how I think libertarians ought to feel about this. And you know, there's lots of great things in the Constitution, but there's been lots of bad things in there too. So
you'll pass.
I don't know.
Any response?
Happy to share this with Dave if you want. The Constitution, but there is no enumerated power for Congress to control immigration specifically. It was made up during the Progressive era by a Supreme Court that said, oh, it's like an inherent power of the sovereign, you know, that mighty magical beast that channels the will of the people, the Leviathan. It's an inherent power because of like magic words and stuff. So no, there's no
Wasn't it,
power.
Alex, I'm sure you know this better than me, but wasn't it run by the states at the beginning of the Union? Like, wasn't it?
So it's like states in theory had that power. Almost none of them exercised it. So like Castle Island in New York, they set up like a place that was kind of like a pre-Ellis Island. But basically in the 85 years before the feds took it over, the states deported on total, I've been able to count about 7,000 people total, and most of them actually to other states. So basically they shoved them all in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I want to apologize.
Hey, now we may have found a policy we can both support. Here, all right.
I support shoving everybody we don't want in Pennsylvania.
Sorry,
Philly, but he really make it better.
One cool part.
I want to apologize to the audience. Guys, this will have to be our last question, and you can come to the party and confront the debaters afterwards. Final question from the balcony. Take it away.
Thank you. The resolution references peaceful and healthy people, seemingly off the table that non-peaceful or non-healthy people may have the right to come here without restrictions. You, Alex, spoke to that a little bit, and you said they might have due process when they get here, so they'd be innocent until proven guilty, rather than, I guess, the way it is now, where you're saying they have to prove their innocence. I'm wondering how that would work, because, right, that process begins when a crime happens and an accusation is levied.
Yeah, this is what I was arguing in the beginning, but even that is a BS point, because crime data में आएगा कहाँ से? कोई चोरी डकैती किया, छोड़ा घुसा दिया कहाँ पे किसी के बॉडी में, तब तो जाके crime register होगा. दिमाग में शरिया लॉ है, यहाँ पे आगे शरिया के फेवर में वोट करते रहेगा, तब भोसड़ी के तुम कहाँ से क्या लीगलिटी और इलीगलिटी मरवाओगे?
And then there's due process for that, for the state or whoever to prove that the crime occurred. I don't think, to me, that could happen very easily in a large-scale Ellis Island type setting where people are coming in and no accusations have been levied against them. So I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of little practical concerns. Listen, one of the things that I think Dave and I probably agree on is we are very, very far from a libertarian world in practically every way, right? Now, there's lots of ways that we can imagine this stuff being done. You have one of the ways it was done before Ellis Island, actually, when criminals were barred, is that they usually look at, like, the manifests and basically just be like, hey, you're covered in face tattoos. The only people from Italy covered in face tattoos are criminals. We're just going to talk to you for a few minutes and check it out. You know, but there's lots of practicalities. But, man, I spend a lot of time in D.C. talking with bureaucrats and politicians about these things, and I'm just looking forward to having a drink so we can talk about principles.
You know, I think that there's, okay, so one of the things that's kind of been interesting in this whole debate is that there just is this disconnect between how libertarians like to think about these things versus the reality of what we're living through. And I understand that. In my heart of hearts, I really don't ever want to be advocating that the government do anything to anybody. But the idea that you're going to say you have due process for, and there's very different arguments here. Making the argument that you have due process for someone before they're deported from this country is a very different argument than saying that anybody from anywhere in the world, whether invited or uninvited, has some due process right, like as if they get the presumption of you're allowed to be here before that can be pushed away. Look, again, there's just no way to.
Yeah, this is kind of the answer to what Rishabh is saying here. Entering the US without valid visa is a crime, so यहाँ the act of entering the country is the crime. ऋषभ, वो एक्चुअली उसके ऊपर अप्लाई नहीं होगा, क्योंकि वो तब भी बोलेगा कि देखो वो क्राइम तो नहीं करवाना है उनसे, क्योंकि हम तो इमिग्रेशन पूरी तरह से लीगल कर देंगे. इमिग्रेशन नाम का कोई चीज़ ही नहीं होगा, बॉर्डर नाम का कोई चीज़ नहीं होगा. आओ जाओ, यहाँ पे बॉर्डर एरिया का जो नाम है वो नाम होगा, बॉर्डर उसको बोला ही नहीं जाएगा. तो तब तो क्रिमिनल नहीं रहा वो. अगर कोई चेकअप होता है और चेकिंग में पता भी चलता है कि वो क्रिमिनल नहीं है, मैं तो पूछ रहा हूँ कि तब भी क्या, वो आने के बाद क्या क्या करेगा पूरा ज़िंदगी, या फिर कोई ऑन पेपर कोई क्राइम ना भी करे तब भी क्या, जो पॉलिसी वोट करते रहेगा, विच इज़ बेसिकली योर पॉइंट ओनली, कि वो तो सिविल लिबर्टीज़ अमेरिका का इरोड करते रहेगा, क्योंकि उसको कुछ घंटा फर्क नहीं पड़ता, उसने लिबर्टी नाम का कोई चीज़ ज़िंदगी में सुना ही नहीं है. तब क्या वो क्राइम है कि नहीं? वो तो एक तरह का तो क्राइम है ही.
Do this without having a dramatic increase in the. Look, I'll just say this. Do you know, this is one of the craziest like stats, and it was a little bit because the height was in the middle of Joe Biden's administration, but we had record high border crossings under Joe Biden, and then we have record low border crossings right now under Donald Trump. And so much of that isn't even just like a policy change. It's just like what the president is saying, what the impression is, that the bat signal that goes out to the world. If we were to say right now that we have Alex's immigration policy, anybody can come, and actually the burden is on us to prove that you're sick or you're a terrorist or you're a violent, whatever that means. We're convicted of a violent crime once. Are you being violent right now? Whatever exactly that means. I mean, you'd be sending out the bat signal to the world. This is why I was saying I'm not making an appeal to democracy or an appeal to popularity. I am making an appeal to reality. And like, I just don't know if libertarians really appreciate how destabilizing this would
Dave,
be for our society.
Could you start your 5 minutes of summary? Because it's your time for summary. So please.
You know, I was done right there, and now I'm a little mad at you. That seemed unnecessary. So, no, I'm sorry. Okay, can I sit here, or are we going back to the podiums?
You can sit on the floor. You can sit on the stage.
All right. Well, look. Okay, let me. All right, 5 minutes of summary here. I try to touch on a few things here. Look, I really do. Look, I have a lot of respect for Alex, and despite what we've had on Twitter, I actually like Alex, and I'm really grateful that he came and did this here. I've enjoyed this. And I just don't think Alex is really grappling with the arguments that I've laid out. And so let me respond to a few of the things that he said. Number one, the idea that as he spent a lot of his time arguing about like the way Donald Trump has been implementing this has been bad, or the way the government implements this is bad, and then said, well, I can't divorce myself from the government if you know, like if I support a policy, you know the government's going to violate rights. Yeah, but this would be an argument for murder being legal. I mean, if you want to say murder is going to be illegal, we know for a fact that the monopoly known as the government is going to mess that up. There are going to be people who go to jail and they were not guilty. That is going to happen, okay? But like at the same time, I think it's reasonable saying like,
this was one of the reasons before turning into an Indian right-winger in 2021. After turning into a libertarian 2018 onwards, I was opposed to CA. Not because anyone has the right to enter the country, because I was already a kind of a nationalist by then. But I knew that the government is going to screw it up. Therefore, since it's going to send some people just by mistake to Bangladesh or Pakistan, therefore let's not have it at all. But of course, the scale and degree has to be again, and the trade-offs have to be discussed.
To happen, okay? But like at the same time, I think it's reasonable saying like, current environment, modern America, just saying murder's legal now, that really isn't going to be a great scenario. I don't think that's going to work out very well. Now, Alex also made the point, which I do not think is true, that if I was applying this to anything else, you know, if we were applying this to guns, he made the comparison to having kids. Oh, these kids are going to change the culture. But what's the major difference here, okay? The difference is that obviously having a child is a natural right. Obviously, like having a gun is a natural right. I think more reasonably, the question would be, do I apply this within reason on government property at all? So would it be reasonable for, let's say, the government to have a rule about how you can't shoot up heroin on a public street? Yeah, actually, I do kind of think that would be reasonable. I think it's totally reasonable from the libertarian perspective to be like, hey, you can do that, but you got to take it home. You can't do it here. We will remove you. You don't have a right to be here. Is it reasonable, as I laid out in the beginning, for the government to have rules about who's allowed and not allowed to enter a public school? Yeah, I actually do think that. I think there are many reasonable restrictions that the government can have on public property, and obviously it does not extend from that you could think of bad examples of it. You could extend this principle and think of some pretty disastrous reductio absurdums, but you could also recognize that the reductio absurdum to having zero restrictions would be equally as bad. You simply just can't operate a society this way. And so I think that Alex has kind of dodged the real central reality here, which is that it's not just that there was chaos at the border that was caused by the fact that we have this crazy over-regulated immigration system. That's true. That's certainly, it certainly is true that if you just said, everyone's allowed to come here, then yeah, you wouldn't have had the exact same chaos at the border.
Rishabh's point.
Listen, man, as I said before, the American people are screaming at the top of their lungs and have been for decades and decades and decades. They don't want this level of immigration. And I really do think that kind of, to me, the moment of the debate was Alex saying that they own it, about the Swedish taxpayers. Well, if that's the case, like if the case is that they own it, or the case is that even if this fact, and listen, Alex, he's a very smart economist, so he made a fair point.
No, Dave Smith is not entirely correct here, of course, because in the end, the American taxpayers who are really vocal and all, Dave Smith is celebrating them to such a degree that, oh, the people have spoken, the people have spoken. वही people विवेक रामास्वामी को ostracize करेगा जब विवेक रामास्वामी बोलेगा कि भोसड़ी का तुमको तो काम करना ही नहीं आता है, तुम बैठ के जॉक बनो, तुम सिर्फ चीयर लीडिंग करो और स्पोर्ट्स खेलो और लोगों को बोलो कि नहीं 8-10 घंटा से ज़्यादा हम काम नहीं कर सकते हैं, ये क्या स्लेव लेबर जैसे काम करे थोड़ी इंडियंस की तरह, तब तो यूएसए का अमीर रहना ही गड्ढे में चला जाएगा. तो इफ़ यू डोंट वर्क लाइक एन इंडियन देन यूल हैव टू हैव इंडियंस इन द कंट्री. हमारा लकीली वो एग्जैक्टली प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, वो अमेरिका का यही प्रॉब्लम है.
Maybe if they could sell that factory to the highest bidder and then gave it back to the taxpayers, that would be a better deal than just directly giving the stock to the taxpayers. But I think the point still remains that we're all acknowledging that that taxpayer has more of a claim to it than somebody from the rest of the world. And let me just tell you this very, very quickly, and then I'll wrap up on this. If I go over by a few seconds, Alex, you get more time. Just very, very quickly. This is one of the things that turned me around on immigration, because I used to completely agree with Alex. In fact, I would have taken it a little bit further. I was an open borders guy. And I saw this interview of this guy who was an immigration restrictionist. And they were asking him why he supports these immigration restrictions. And he literally said what I was talking about just at the end of the question and answer segment. They lived in a border town in Texas. And he was like, he goes, I've lived here, I'm in the same house as my grandfather. We've lived in this town for generations. He goes, my grandkids go to the public school. I went to that school. My father went to that school. My grandfather went to that school. We've been paying property taxes this entire time. And in just a few years, the school's been transformed. And it's now majority of the kids don't speak English. Many of them have been traumatized. I know some people mock me over that. Let me tell you something I know about you that you don't know already. You don't have kids. And for the rest of people in this crowd, for the rest of the people who do have children, you can understand where, like, that'd be very concerning. And you would sit here and go, hey, I've been the taxpayer this whole time. This money was stolen from me. He wasn't a libertarian. He may not have said it exactly like that, but it has been. Like, how come I don't get a say in this? And when the numbers are so overwhelming, the American people...
What's interesting is that I saw comments on different YouTube videos under this or on the ones reviewing this debate that that Dave Smith lost the debate. He was hammered. He was destroyed by Alex. देखो भाई, तो उनको लग रहा है होगा वो, क्योंकि but that would be on the basis of कि हाँ Dave could not prove himself to be a pure anarcho-capitalist libertarian, इसलिए he lost the debate. वही हो सकता है argument उन लोगों का.
Do not want this. And if there's one thing libertarians should understand, you're going to force something this major on the American people when they do not want it, expect a backlash. And it's not going to be what you guys want to see. It's not going to be what any of us want to see. Thank you guys very much.
From Alex.
Travel is a natural right. Don't believe me, just read John Locke's essay on naturalization. John Locke, one of the founders and most important...
I did not like it when Dave used the natural rights argument, because what is natural and what is naturalistic, वो सब fallacy के चक्कर में घुस ही सकते हैं, and no surprise therefore that Alex is now extending it.
Important people in the Enlightenment and a great inspiration to libertarians since then. Dave made the point in the last several minutes, right before his 5-minute thing, about how Alex has this presumption of liberty. You're darn right I do. You're darn right I have a presumption of liberty when it comes to immigration and everything else. Michael Huemer, the libertarian philosopher in Colorado, who's written some of the best essays on this and other libertarian topics, also calls it a presumption of liberty. So I'm like very happy to be lumped in with what I consider to be the most prominent libertarian philosopher and anarcho-capitalist in the world today, who agrees with me on this.
हाँ, अभी appeal to authority नहीं है. एक चीज़ पे भी डेव का कोई एग्जांपल में उसको काउंटर ही नहीं किया. It's I guess a good debate tactic, but
this topic. When it comes to all of the problems that Dave has pointed out, you know, public schools, welfare, all this stuff, I agree. Great arguments against public schools. Great arguments against welfare. Also, great arguments, but not good arguments against immigration. They are arguments that are just as good against having children as they are against immigration. Take every argument he raised and replace the word immigrant with having children.
How, Gandu, how? वो तो consent से, अपने consent से बच्चे को जन्म दिया और उसका अपब्रिंगिंग खुद किया उसके पैसे से. उसमें वो स्टेक होल्डर है डायरेक्टली, और फिर उसने उसको पढ़ाया भी ताकि वो कल्चर कुछ 180 डिग्री चेंज ना कर दे बाद में जाके. How is that similar to illegal immigration or legal immigration?
And see if that argument makes sense. Because the logic is identical. It is identical. And if you oppose government restrictions on peaceful people or on just anybody having kids, then you have to oppose government restrictions on peaceful and healthy people crossing the border. We want to see continuously, and I don't think Dave has dealt with this once, he continuously assumes that immigrants coming here are uninvited or they're not welcome. Well, you know, I want to point you guys to something called the market economy and labor markets. People, Americans, want to hire these folks. They want to rent to them. They want to buy from them. They want to sell to them. They want to deal with them. That is the vast, vast majority of immigration in the United States. That's why people come here unlawfully.
अरे अब लिबर्टेरियन को स्टैटिस्टिकल फैलेसी हम सिखाए, क्या दिन आ गए. तो भाई प्रॉब्लम यह है कि वास्ट ओवरवेलमिंग मेजॉरिटी या फिर स्टोरी भी नहीं है. ओवरवेलमिंग बोला, ही डिडंट वांट टू से कि मेजॉरिटी लोग यही चाहते हैं, क्योंकि तब तो वो खुद डेव स्मिथ का गलती कर बैठेगा. मगर जो लोग चाहते हैं कि इलीगल इमिग्रेंट्स आए और बिजनेस में ज्वाइन करे, वो दे आर ओनली द बिजनेस ओनर्स एंड नॉट एवरीवन इज अ बिजनेस ओनर.
And the government gets in the way from stopping them. When I came here this morning from Virginia on a train, nobody's going to make the argument that I violated a bunch of people's rights on the way just because I bought a ticket and got a hotel room and bought a slice of pizza on the way here. This was all voluntary. So what if, instead of taking the train from Virginia, I took the train from Canada? Is there any difference? Borders are ethically irrelevant when it comes to libertarianism. They are irrelevant when it comes to this stuff. The borders exist to keep out other governments. They do not exist to keep out peaceful and healthy people, and that's the way that we should.
I absolutely love this argument because that is exactly the argument I was going to make, which is that therefore it's an argument against even this open border policy or anarcho-capitalism, because we have to prevent people who are influenced by other governments. Okay, because they are influenced by socialism. Let's say they are even probably criminals because of a socialist country that they were brought up in, or they grew up in. We have to prevent the influences of all those governments, their ideologies, their way of thinking that has seeped into the minds of those people. Therefore, illegal or some degree of cap has to be there on all kinds of immigration, because we have to prevent the influence of those governments in the country. And Alex is actually right here.
Take it, and that's the way that we should look on this. Dave, I think, is using the language of libertarianism to justify some preferences that I don't think are supported or at all consistent with libertarian principles. There are really only two political movements in the world, and there always have been only two. On one side is power, and the other side is individual liberty. And I want you to think to yourself tonight, who was the person up here defending liberty and who was defending power? Who was the person who was supporting the power of the state, funded by taxpayers?
If you reduce the beautiful debate you just had for 1.5 hours to this sort of absurdity, then it's a shame on you yourself, Alex. And if all anarcho-capitalists are like this, we are going to have a nice fun time, because they are such idiots at debating. Okay, then if a lot of people, or a lot of libertarians give nationalist libertarians or Hindutwadis a hard time on Twitter on this particular issue, you know what to say.
To send armed guards and armed individuals to tear people away from their voluntary contracts, mutually beneficial relationships, and remove them from the United States? Who is the person who is in favor of having restrictions on the border, to check people out, to build a wall, to lionize and to support President Trump saying things, putting up a bat signal that stops people from coming here? Do you know why that bat signal is effective? It's supported by violence. It's supported by the state. It's supported by trillions of dollars of taxpayer money. It's supported by activating the military and the largest law enforcement apparatus in the history of this country. That is the pro-power position that is dominated and supported by Dave in this debate. My position is one of liberty. My position is the one that Americans and immigrants should be free to interact without government interference on the terms that they mutually agree upon. That is individual liberty. That is individual freedom. That is free market capitalism. That is libertarianism. Thank you.
Is Tootsie Roll available? Do we have the results? I think we do have the results, okay?
The problem with this sort of a government, one of the many problems, is that you'll be pretty much stuck in signing negotiations and contracts with individual people all day long and not do any other job, okay? Let's see some comments now. Oh, yeah. For those who are joining right now, remember to check out the comment section, the description box, and the pinned message in the live chat. It's a crowdfunding thing I'm doing for a music video project, which will be the biggest music video, the most impactful music video you have ever seen from Bengal. We will talk about it in other live streams as well. For now, thank you for joining the live stream, guys. Good night. See you soon.